I'm gonna run
Okay,
this.
everybody, we are on. Would like to open the agenda for the Georgetown Planning Board, February 27th, 2019 meeting. We're in the third floor conference room. It's 5 after 7. We have minutes, vouchers, correspondence, presentation on green communities, discussion on street acceptance, and then 2 planning office items. So with that, we'll go to the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the draft meeting minutes for the 13 February 2019 Planning Board meeting as written.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion has been made, it's been seconded to approve the meeting minutes of February 13th, 2019. Any discussion?
Just one minor correction, Mr. Chairman. And believe was, oh yeah, line number 151. Line number 151 on page 4. It says, it's a quote I made, and I think it's taken out of context because it was in relation to a discussion that isn't really shown there about a potential zoning article to remove the prohibitions for additional buildings on the lot. Although, looking at it, it looks as though it's specifically related to that. So,
You wanna strike it? I mean, when I read it, it jumped out at me.
it jumped out because you don't see what was before all
And it
of
sounded
that.
important.
Yeah, it was all before that, yeah.
I thought
But,
that was connected to 51 West Main. Maybe it was just jumped from their computer.
I think, no, it wasn't. It wasn't, it was related to a discussion about a potential zoning article
Yeah.
that we never
It
discussed
was
before.
a general statement.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But to read it there, you would think it's number 2.
Yeah.
So,
I'm fine with just deleting it. if
just
everyone else is.
scratch it. I'm good with it.
Any other?
Just that they didn't note that you were the member who was absent. You left your name out.
Oh, that's
See how
okay.
quickly you're forgotten?
Yes, we all are.
The fate of all of us, Joey.
True. True. You're only as good as your last job.
Or unless they want a quorum. Then you missed.
Any other? All right, seeing no more discussion, all in favor?
Aye. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we consider the correspondence as read.
Second.
Motion has been made, and it's been seconded to approve the correspondence as written, as provided. Any discussion?
Yes, I have a question about the letter from the Registrar of Deeds, John J. O'Brien,
gotta do that,
regarding the
right?
form and
Yes.
da-da-da-da.
Yeah, and that's ready to be signed by everybody tonight.
And that's basically it.
Yeah.
That's this right here?
Yes. Yep.
He gives our signatures
Why don't
to the
we-
registrar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There, figured that.
Pass her around.
Top and bottom?
Is it, oh, top and bottom, sorry.
You live in infamy.
Permanent records of the Commonwealth.
Well, that's going around, so there was a piece of correspondence that was sent out separately on CVS. And I was just curious, while this is being signed.
Yeah. They're proposing to change the upstairs to residential.
Yeah.
So they're gonna be coming in fairly soon.
Does that goes in front for site
Z-
plan approval? Goes CBA
yes.
for the.
Yeah,
Yeah,
variance,
CBA.
but
for
it
us.
does come to us, right?
Yeah.
That was really all I cared about.
Got a lot coming our way soon.
It's gonna get busy?
Very busy. I'll mention some later tonight that are coming to us first via ZBA. And then full site plan later, but we got a lot of other applicants
Oh, you want to pay
off of exit 54.
Is-
Right.
Were
Never
there
into that
boxes that needed to be checked off on that second one, down at the bottom? Something that needed to be checked off or something? Or am I thinking of the old one?
We're gonna collect a lot of affordable housing money.
Maybe not, okay,
Yeah.
sorry, my fault.
the next meeting. Matt said he wasn't the calculator for that.
Oh, no, he didn't do it? See, it never was talked about.
I'm still trying to get to the bottom of who devised it.
It doesn't it just gnaw at you? Can you get figure it out?
Does Tilly?
We
need
can
to sign?
pass those things back so you don't have to.
Oh, no, it can't go that way.
Oh, it's a one-way.
No,
oh,
it's like a
it's
diode
a
thing.
valve,
It's a, yeah, it's a
Okay,
check
I didn't wanna
valve
mess up
diode.
things.
Let's see. So Tilly's the
Or I
last
could just-
signature on
Shoot it down there.
that
As far as
item.
it goes on
I'll
the
put it
table.
back in this
Some of these
here.
meetings folded in it.
And we can move on to, with correspondence, that we didn't have any vouchers tonight. With correspondence being completed, we can move on to the Green Communities presentation by Mr. Duffy. I'm putting this back in here.
Go ahead. Yeah. Ready for him? Ready.
You could just introduce yourself for the
Sure.
record, please, and
Yeah, so I'm Neil Duffy. I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator for the Green Communities Division at the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. And I'm here to talk about the, mainly about the Green Communities Designation and Grant Program. So before I talk about the Designation and Grant Program, I just want to make sure to mention that our division serves all Massachusetts municipalities. The Designation and Grant Program is certainly our flagship program and what we spend a lot of time on, but we do have other programs, and we like to think of ourselves and we want you to think of us as sort of the clean energy hub and as a resource for Georgetown. So whether or not you're a designated green community, you should think of me and our office as a resource for you if you have clean energy projects or ideas that you want to pursue. The types of assistance that we provide is funding, technical assistance for for clean energy and energy efficiency projects, for the most part in municipal facilities and schools and that sort of thing. But even if there's a commercial project that's happening, if there's a solar commercial project happening, you need some guidance or want some information, I'm sort of the first point of contact for that, and then I can help connect you, if I don't know the answers, can help connect you with whoever you need to speak with in our office. Some of the programs that we have, there's the Designation and Grant Program that I'll go into detail about. We also have a streetlight grant program, which Georgetown actually benefited from, I think last year, maybe a year and a half ago, where you converted all your streetlights, and the funding, that funding came from DOER. There are META grants, which are Municipal Energy Technical Assistance Grants, which you as a town are eligible for, and those grants go largely towards funding studies. So if you wanted to do a feasibility study on a community shared solar project or a microgrid in Georgetown or solar and storage at a school or something like that, those meta grants go to fund that type of those types of studies. You don't have to be in your community to be able to apply for those. And we also have energy tracking and analysis tool called Mass Energy Insight, which is available to all cities and towns. So you can track your energy use at municipal facilities, and it's used mainly by green communities because it's part of the way that they track their energy use, which is part of one of the requirements. But it's there as a tool for all communities, and so Georgetown is up there as a one of the towns, and any account that we had when Mass Energy Insight started that was attached to Georgetown was added there. So those would be National Grid accounts, not your municipal-like accounts. So to move on to the Designation and Grant Program, right now in Massachusetts there are 240 designated green communities. We just had 30 new ones come in recently, and we expect to have somewhere in the range of like 20 or 30 coming in this year in 2019. Next slide, please. Actually, go back to the map for a minute, so I'll point out. So I'll talk about this maybe a little bit more on another slide, but you can see there, there's sort of a white splotch up there where you guys are, that you are part of that white, and those are, I think all, other than Newbury, those are all municipal light plant towns. And so the reason that municipal light plant communities are tend to not be green communities because there's a requirement for MLP towns to add a charge to your bill. It's called the renewable energy charge, and that charge is a 1/20 of a cent per kilowatt hour. So it turns out to be about 30 cents a month for a typical resident more. But one of the reasons I'm here is that there is if you have a National Grid or Eversource or any investor-owned utility electric customer within your town, if you just have one, then you are able to go around that requirement of adding the charge. And we know that Georgetown actually does have one of those customers because the municipal light plant told us that. So that is one of the main reasons I'm here, because adding that charge, as you can imagine, is politically a difficult thing to pull off. We're open to municipal light plants that want to add that charge, but we also know that that's a hard thing to do. So just wanted to mention that, and then we can move on, John.
So there is a mechanism around that.
Yeah, and you have that in place. Yeah.
Even if it's just one person.
Yeah, what happened was some years ago, another community that was a municipal light plant community knew that they had a number of customers that were, I think they were Eversource customers, and that and they posed the question, well, we have all these customers that aren't municipal light within our town. Do we qualify? And at the time, DOER decided, well, where would we draw the line? And so we decided that we would draw the line at one. So that was the decision that was made at the time, and that's what we've been going with going forward. To date, we provide up to $20 million a year in grants and loans to qualifying towns. That's what we're authorized to spend every year. And those grants go to fund largely energy efficiency initiatives, some renewable energy projects, but mostly it's upgrading your building infrastructure for the most part. So it would be like LED lighting conversions in your schools or this building, or HVAC upgrades, weatherization, often projects that you may need to do anyways. But if they save energy essentially, then they usually qualify. Okay, next slide. So to date, we've funded over $100 million in grants we've awarded. Those grants are projected to be saving over $14 million a year for the communities that have received them. 360 grants have been completed. As you can see, significant projected savings in greenhouse gas emissions reductions as a result of the program, and that just builds year in and year out. Just to give you a sense of what some of your neighbors have received. So Amesbury is a good example of a green community that's been in the program for a long time, as is Newburyport. So you can see that they received an initial designation grant, and then they've participated in our competitive annual grants every year. So that's why they're up towards $1 million, whereas Boxford was just designated last year. So that was their designation grant. So the disparity in funding really reflects either the activity of that green community or how long they've been in the program. If Georgetown were to become a green community, the way it works is once you're designated, you receive a designation grant, and that grant is for every city and town is $125,000, and then based on your per capita income and population, there's an adder. So for Georgetown, your designation grant would be $140,000. once that grant is spent down, once you complete your projects for your designation grant, then you would be eligible to participate in the competitive grants, and those are offered annually, and they're capped at $250,000. So the eligibility requirement for competitive grants is, as long as you've spent down your previous grants, then you can participate in competitive grants. So how do you become a green community? There are 5 criteria. As I mentioned, as an MLP town, you don't need to add that charge, so you just need to meet the 5 criteria that any investor-owned utility town needs to meet. So these are the 5 criteria in a list, but I'll go through them one at a time on different slides. So if you just go to the next slide. So criteria 1 and 2 are tied together. It's what it is that you need to have as of right siting and expedited permitting for one of these 3 types of facilities, either renewable and alternative energy generating facilities, or research and development facilities, or manufacturing facilities. So you need to have as of right zoning, and that's criteria 1. And then the expedited permitting piece is that the permitting process for that, whichever facility that you have the zoning for, that permitting process can't take more than a year. Go ahead.
We already have a 43D expedited permitting overlay district.
Yeah, so I think when we looked at it, I can look now. Usually what, I don't know your zoning intimately, but I think that some of your zoning in place may work. And that's usually what, if you have like a light industrial district or commercial district, R&D and light manufacturing in many towns is already allowed by right in certain districts. So you may have that in place already. So that's something that we would have to look into. And if you do have something in place already, then what would be required to fulfill the criteria is we need a letter from the town's attorney saying that the zoning that you have meets our requirements and that the permitting process in place isn't longer than a year. And what I mean by that is there's nothing in your process that takes longer than a year. I know that sometimes issuing a permit can be longer because of a particular project, but as long as there's nothing built in that delays it. And then you would just need to show us that you have the space available to build those types of facilities in that district, and there's a minimum of 50,000 square feet. So that's 1 and 2. If you don't have the zoning in place, then it would require a vote at town meeting. You'd have to create an overlay district, and we would have to do some work with John and probably you folks to figure out the best way to approach that.
So Jim, can I ask one more? Can I
Yeah.
interrupt one more time?
Yeah, how many slides, just a question, so how many slides do you have?
I think it's 20 something.
Okay.
And we can skip. I can try to move faster.
No,
if
no,
you
it's
want.
not about moving faster, I just, whatever the best way of doing it was, and so
Yeah,
go, 20 is fine.
Yeah, I think it's good for each criteria to ask those questions while they're coming up. Probably is fine.
With 20 slides, that'll work.
Yeah, I just, back to one of those 3 or more uses.
Yep.
The R&Ds, and you said that if we were to, would that have to be anywhere in town or by right in an overlay district that we designate, which could be in our 43D anyway?
Right. So you
Okay.
could do something like that.
Okay, thank
But
you.
like when I look at your table of uses that I have, like you have a light industry, and it looks like a light industry use, and it looks like in the IA and IB district, that looks like it's allowed by right. So that may be that would maybe meet your manufacturing. And you also have research and development and in the CC, what's CC, commercial something?
Commercial C district.
Yeah, so that is, it looks like permitted by right there.
You know, when
according
you
to-
say permitted by right, you're talking, it's permitted by.
The site plan review.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Plenty of those.
that's right, that's right,
And I think
yeah.
we have a
So I think,
section of
I
that
think
in
what
the
you have in
release.
place probably meets it, I never say definitively until we dig a little deeper, but I don't think that would be an issue, it would just be confirming that you're okay. But yeah,
now-
to your question, if you weren't okay, then you could try to create an overlay district. Some towns will create like a solar overlay district for solar generating, like large ground mounted solar, but the overlay district will be on town owned land so that the town still has control over whether or not solar is built there. So it's a way to maintain control but still have the zoning that meets our requirement. It's a little bit counter to the intent of the criteria, but it's allowed. The idea is that we want to promote these types of facilities and make it easier for them to be built. So the third criteria is what we sometimes call, like the term paper of the green communities designation process. It's probably the most amount of work that needs to be done to become designated, and that is that you need to develop an energy use baseline for the town, and that is all the energy that the town uses, just municipal facilities, not residents and not commercial. So schools, this building, police, fire, and all your vehicle fuel use as well.
We went through this
We did
exercise.
this.
Yeah,
We paid like $3 million for this,
Right.
if I recall, at a town meeting.
Can you use it?
Well,
I don't know how old it is, but it's the same.
So your
it
baseline,
isn't it?
yeah, your baseline, you can go back 2 years. So I don't know how long ago you did it, but you may.
It's close.
What you may have from that is you may have aggregated account information, which could be helpful if you have all your account numbers for your gas and your MLP accounts. The usual way that the baseline is developed is that Mass Energy Insight tool that I mentioned. You load all your account information up there. The electric information would need to be manually uploaded. But all of your national grid accounts, you just add those accounts, and MEI, the administrators of Mass Energy Insight, have a relationship with the utilities where they just add those accounts and they pull it automatically. So again, that would be something that we'd have to work through and work out and figure out who's doing that. But you develop your baseline, and then the way typically towns develop energy reduction plans is first you figure out what you've done lately. So like the streetlight, the reason we allowed you to go back 2 years is so you can include like your streetlight conversion in your energy reduction plan. So we want you to be able to take credit for things you've done recently, but we also don't allow you to go so far back that you say, we put a new boiler in the town hall in 2010, that's too far. So we want you to be identifying mostly measures that will be done in the future. The idea is you're identifying the measures in your energy reduction plan that then you can apply for the funding, and we can fund those measures. Depending on what you have done and what you may have ready to go, that's the first place we look, is what you've done recently and what you may have planned. And then we would strategize and try to do scoping audits of all your buildings, essentially, to identify the low-hanging fruit in every building to develop an energy reduction plan. The plan needs to be approved by the schools and the Board of Selectmen. It is what you should think of it as a roadmap to get to 20%, and you're identifying one way to get there, but you're not, while you're listing specific projects, you're not committing to those projects financially or otherwise, other than you're saying this is one way that we can get there. You're also not restricted to those projects in terms of what you apply for in your grant. So if something came up that you didn't apply for your you didn't identify your energy reduction plan, but 2 years in, something comes up that seems like a viable project, then you can apply for that.
We just built a new school, and it was energy efficient. We got a credit for that from the state because we
Right.
did certain things. Now, where do we put that on? Do we include
So when did you build the school?
past couple of years?
3 years ago?
Yeah, so so having a building like that in your baseline can make it a little bit more challenging because a building like that is a pretty high user, and it also is efficient, right? So there probably won't be any measures that you can do there, but you would just have to make up for it in the other buildings, and without knowing what else there is, I can just tell you that often the concern for most towns is we won't be able to identify the savings, and so far everyone who's made the attempt has come up with the savings. So we haven't found a town yet that put in the effort that couldn't find the savings that you need. When we say 20%, one thing that's important to know is that when we say 20%, it's actually 15% in what we call hard quantifiable measures, and then the other 5% can be made up with softer measures such as like anti-idling policies or behavior change programs, or increased maintenance and tracking the air pressure in the tires of vehicles, like softer measures that are less quantifiable, but is documentation on what that type of
But they're impactful.
Right,
yeah,
like
that type of thing
maintenance
can
things,
get
yeah.
you for savings.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind where your plan overall, we really need that 15%. So you're already 5% of the way there essentially, because
The
we
rest-
have
rest
we
like
have those
behavioral
sort of
changes.
tricks of the trade that you can include in your plan. The other part of it is that we provide technical assistance through the regional planning agencies. So in your case, MVPC would help develop your plan and help develop your baseline. Saying that, you also would want to identify a person or people who actually work for the town or volunteers who would be doing it as well, because MVPC
Here we
can,
go.
right.
Looking at 'em.
yeah, so that's so, right, but it's just I say the MVPC thing because it's a huge help and they do an awful lot, but I also want to make sure it's important for two reasons. One is that they don't do everything; it is assistance, but also it's really important that someone in the town is learning this and paying attention to it and has the institutional knowledge going forward, rather than every time you have a question you have to go to MVPC
Right.
or to me. You want
And our
someone to,
town administrator has a setup, what do you call that he does? He had it evaluated, all the use of utilities,
Yeah.
and they evaluated how much we had used and what savings we were gonna do. It's on the order of what you're saying.
yeah. And so, and to do the plan in any of your gas heated buildings, you can do these scoping audits at no cost through National Grid. You can use their vendors. If you have buildings that are oil heated, then that can be a little bit trickier. We do also provide technical assistance grants to do audits of oil heated buildings for that reason. And the reason for that is because you're an MLP town, unless your municipal light plant has some sort of auditing program, which I don't think they do, then if you have an oil heated building, then National Grid wouldn't be doing it. There have been cases where auditors for National Grid were doing a number of buildings and they're willing to go through the buildings that are oil heated and identify some measures just because they're here, and they do it hopefully to create a strong relationship with the town. So again, that's something further down the line to be worked out. but that's usually how it works. So the next slide is, so criteria 4 is a fuel efficient vehicle purchase policy. And that is that both the town and the schools would need to adopt our fuel efficient vehicle purchase policy. The important thing to know about that is that emergency vehicles are exempt, and anything over 8,500 pounds is exempt. So all your heavy duty DPW vehicles would be exempt.
We were worrying about the fire trucks,
Yeah,
so they would be exempt.
they'd be exempt. So some towns don't have any non-exempt vehicles.
I was just gonna say, what do we have that isn't? I can't think of any.
Yeah, so I don't know. And so if you don't, then there's an alternative policy that we have. We have a model policy that involves, again, like as an example, you could have like carpooling, parking space here at town hall, or you could have incentive.
We do have it, I think, at the Penn.
Right. So it's a little bit fuzzier if you don't have any non-exempt vehicles, but there is an alternative policy if it comes to that. If you have just one non-exempt vehicle, then you would just be adopting our model policy. And what it's saying is, when you're replacing a vehicle, you need to replace it with one that meets the standard that we've set, the fuel economy standard that we set. It's not saying that you have to switch everything out. The only other part of it,
Is that saying you have to replace it, or you?
no, it's just when you replace it.
No, I understand. So when you replace it.
It has to meet our requirements. That's right. So, but just to give you an example, like a Ford F-150, a light duty pickup truck, meets the standard that we've set for light duty pickup trucks. So if you have a Ford F-150 in town, you need to replace it. A new Ford F-150 would meet our criteria. So it's not incredibly, we're not telling you that you have to replace vehicles with Chevy Bolts. The hope is that if you have administrative vehicles, that's what you'd be doing. The only other part of it that you should be aware of is that what it doesn't allow is that like a Crown Vic police cruiser can't be recycled to be used by another department for like an administrative purpose.
Those were good cars.
Yeah.
Good hand-me-downs too.
So
in
that's
other
something
words-
that sometimes people need to
Auction it.
figure out, because that is often a practice for towns, is that they'll
Right.
take their old police cars and use them for the water department. And so we don't allow for that, because we want a fuel efficient vehicle doing that work for the water department. We want to get the inefficient Crown Vics off the road.
So in other words, no
And then-
diesel.
Even their readers.
So diesel, I mean, the diesel tends to be heavy duty, so those are exempt.
Okay.
But we do fund, our grants do fund vehicles, incremental costs for electric vehicles. We also fund retrofitting of heavy duty vehicles or larger vehicles, even though they are exempt. So like some towns more recently have done hybrid retrofits for some heavier duty vans that they have. So it's an option, and there's funding available to do it. We fund charging stations in town. So even if they just have to be publicly accessible, so you put a charging station here, you can put a charging station on the street, in the
So the
library.
grant is not just for technical assistance of planning, that you actually will allow us to receive money.
That, once you're designated.
Yeah.
Once you're designated, yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, so the fifth criteria, is the one, if your zoning is in place and you don't need to take that to town meeting, the fifth criteria is the only thing that would have to go before town meeting. And what it is in the statute, it's that you need to minimize life cycle costs of new construction. And the only way that we know that you can do that, and the only way that anyone has done that, is to adopt the stretch energy code. And so go to the next slide. So the stretch energy code is an alternative energy code, and 250 cities and towns now have adopted it. And the way, I'll try to explain the stretch energy code without getting too deep into it, but go to the next slide, John. So in before I talk about this, so basically you have two choices for an energy code. You can do the base energy code, which is what you have by default, or you can adopt the stretch energy code. Those are your only two choices. You can't, Georgetown can't have your own unique energy code as a town in Massachusetts. So you automatically adopt the code that is Massachusetts's code, which is the base energy code. Important thing to know about the stretch code is that in terms of a difference between the base code and the stretch code, it only applies, go back to the previous one, sorry. It only applies to new residential construction or new commercial construction over 100,000 square feet or over 40,000 square feet for conditioned spaces like labs and supermarkets. So any additions and renovations or repairs that residents are doing, new kitchen, new bathroom, nothing would change for them in terms of what they're required to do and in terms of compliance with the code. That's really important for everyone to understand. The earlier versions of the stretch code, that's not what it was. So there is some misinformation on what the stretch code is and isn't. And that is an important part of, if you went through with it, trying to pass the stretch code is making sure people understand that piece of it. So go to the next slide. So the way the stretch code works, if I were to build a house in Georgetown today, to comply with the base code, I have two options right now in Georgetown. I can take the prescriptive path on the left, which is there's a checklist of compliance measures, such as boilers of a certain efficiency and insulation of a certain R value. And also in that prescriptive path, I'm required to have inspections done during and after construction. And the other path that I can take right now with the base code is the performance path. And the performance path looks at the construction documents of the home before it's built, and modeling is done by a HERS rater, which is a certified building professional, and they give that building a HERS score, that home a HERS score, prior to construction. And it needs to meet a certain score, and I'll talk about that in a minute. There are also the inspections that are done during and post-construction on the performance path. So go to the next slide, John. So what the stretch code says is you can only do the performance path. All the requirements of that performance path are the same in the stretch code as they are in the base code. So it's not a more efficient standard, it's just that you have to be complying using the performance path and not the prescriptive path. Does that make sense? Okay, so why test performance? Why is that the preferred path? Just because you put in the insulation that's required doesn't necessarily mean that the home is performing as expected. It doesn't mean that the insulation was installed properly. There can be small air gaps. So the performance, the modeling at the front and the back end of the home provides a third-party verification that the home's performing at the level that it should. So that's,
Could I interrupt?
Yeah.
Third party, you said third party.
yeah, so that's the HERS rater.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's the HERS rater, and that person would work in conjunction with the building inspector?
Exactly. And actually more in conjunction with the builder. So the building inspector would need that HERS rating prior to, they would need that preliminary HERS rating prior to issuing the permit. And then they would need that final HERS rating prior to issuing the certificate of occupancy. So as I mentioned, in the prescriptive path, there are inspections that are required during and post construction, and those inspections are done almost exclusively by HERS raters. So HERS raters are involved now. So this is an added service that they be providing. And so it's an added cost to the builder. And if you assume the builder is going to pass that cost on to the homeowner, then it's an added cost to the homeowner. And I'll talk about the cost in a minute. But that's what it is. Go to the next slide. So a HERS rating is based on a scale on the HERS index. It's Home Energy Rating System. The reference home that is used in this scale is a 2006 code home. So a 2006 code home is a 100 on this scale. And the requirement now is that if you're following the performance path is that you'd hit a 55. So that's 45% more efficient than a base home in 2006. Again, that 55 requirement is the requirement for the base code. So if I build a home now and I follow the performance path in Georgetown, I have to hit a 55. Same with the stretch code. It's just that with the stretch code in place, that's the only way I can comply. With the base code, you can also do the prescriptive path. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so go to the next slide. So this is essentially the HERS process, which I already mentioned. They do computer modeling at the front end, and then there are in-process inspections. There's a final inspection, and then there's the final energy modeling based on the performance that's verified during the inspections. Go to the next slide. Everything in the box is part of the prescriptive path. So everything in that box happens now in Georgetown, or it should. So the modeling at the front and the back, like I said, is the added piece of this in terms of process and cost. Go to the next slide. So in terms of cost, this is an example of a gas-heated single-family home, and these numbers were provided to us by ICF International, a consulting firm that we work with, and they administer the Mass Save New Construction program. And so this is based on homes that come through their program. And so if you look on the top left, you've got that target of 55, and the assumption is that when the design documents came to the HERS rater, it was a 66. And so this is an example of the cost that would be in place to get this home to a 55. So the costs are $2606. There'd be utility rebates available, which would get those costs down to about $1,000. Again, if you assume that all of this is going to the homeowner, then that would increase their down payment by about $97, and their annual mortgage payment would be going up by $77, but the reduced energy cost per year would be around $200 a year. So in the first year, they'd be positive cash flow, and then every year following, because the down payment would no longer be part of the calculation, they'd be cash flow positive. So that's an example of a gas-heated single-family home. We have similar analyses for any heating fuel, whether it's propane, oil, or electric, that shows essentially the same thing. This is one example. So certainly, I think you could probably show an example of a home that is built where maybe the homeowner is not cash flow positive in the first year, but probably soon thereafter. I think the point here is that it's a pretty small cost that is almost always made up for in the first year. So the last thing I'll say about the stretch code in terms of process, because it needs to be passed by town meeting, if you were to decide to go forward and pursue designation, what we usually do is I and people from ICF can come out and we can do public forums, or we can do builders forums, to make sure that people understand what it is. I think just like anything that you are putting on your warrant at town meeting, it's really important to get the information out there before the town meeting so that at least you can quell any misinformation that may be out there. Because as I mentioned, the stretch code, the energy code changes and the stretch code changes, and they've changed. They change every 3 years. So the first version of the stretch code in 2009 was different than the version that it is now, and it was much more of a stretch. But if you Google stretch code, or if you Google stretch code frequently asked questions, you could come up with a 2009 FAQ document that will be in conflict with everything I just told you tonight. So there's a high potential for people to think differently than what it is. So it's really important to get out in front of that and make sure people know what it is. First step is to make sure your building inspector understands it and is okay with it. You know, but then that's really the process in terms of getting it passed, is getting the information out there and talking to all the stakeholders in town. It's most builders work in multiple towns, and most builders don't find it to be a big deal because they're doing it in a lot of different places.
I've talked to Les about this. All builders in town are already practicing.
That's usually the reaction is like, we already do this.
That's what I was thinking, but you don't mention electric heat or electric,
Yeah, like I said, I mean, for every fuel we have similar analyses, so I can, I can provide that. I just use the gas because it's a common heating fuel. If you go down, John, actually, let me see if I can find it. If you go down to, just go to slide 27, and then just click down one more.
Down here?
Yep. Propane. So go down two more. So this is your, sorry, up one more. Up one more, sorry, to 30. Sorry about that. So this would be an electric heat pump home. So there's actually significant rebates for air source heat pumps right now. So again, it's similar. And again, full disclosure, there are certain variables in certain homes where this can vary. So this isn't like every home turns out this way, but this is just to give people a sense of where the money goes. And I also will say that we are assuming that these costs are all getting passed on to the homeowner. And, there's a lot that goes into pricing for homes aside from this. So, it's a real basic analysis of sort of trying to isolate the energy stuff.
and it also would apply to condominium type setups.
Yeah,
So each unit would be considered a home.
that's right. And they each need to pass a HERS rating. Anything 4 stories and below. Once you get above that, then it starts to get into the commercial realm. Commercial has been across the board sort of less of a concern, because when you're getting to over 100,000 square feet, they're all sort of doing the measures that need to be done to meet the requirement anyways. So we've never really heard much about commercial from commercial builders, as even less so as a concern. And it's even harder to do an analysis when it comes to commercial, because commercial can mean a high school, and it can mean a hospital, and it can mean a lab. So there's a huge difference. But when you do what is becoming industry standard measures, as far as like LED lighting and HVAC equipment that people are putting in almost as standard practice now, they can get there.
Now, do you follow the state building code where if you add on to an existing home, a percentage, it's considered a new?
That's up to the local, that really is to the discretion of the local building inspector, what's considered new and what's considered an addition or renovation. We leave that up to the local official.
Yeah, because I think that's our future. We've got a lot of existing homes and older homes.
Yeah,
They need renovation.
right. So again, it's really up to, that's an interpretation
Okay,
that the
but what he
local building
follows,
inspector
the
needs to
state
make.
building code?
What's
He-
that?
He has to follow the state
Yeah.
building code. So
But there is,
come
I
from-
think there is difference from town to town about what one building inspector may consider. One building inspector may consider a gut renovation a renovation, and one may consider it new construction. And so there's a difference there.
Really?
You get to
I'm-
ask
I'm
your
not
building
familiar with
inspector.
too many.
You get to ask your building inspector about that.
Okay.
The other piece of stretch code that I'll mention, two things is, one is that you are, when you adopt the stretch code, you are adopting future amendments and modifications. So the energy code changes every 3 years, and based on the base energy code, the Mass Board of Building Regulations and Standards develops the stretch code. And so every 3 or so years, the base code changes, and then soon after, a new stretch code is created off of that. And by adopting the stretch code, you're adopting all future versions. To go along with that, just as you adopt the stretch code, you can unadopt it. So if you decided you didn't want the stretch code to be in place anymore in Georgetown, you would go to town meeting and you would unadopt it. No one's ever done that. You would not be a green community anymore, but we also wouldn't ask for our grant funding back or anything. You just wouldn't be a designated green community anymore.
Based on your experience, what are the concerns that you hear with the program? And the other question is, for a town like Georgetown, what are the major hurdles you've seen towns like us having to get over to implement something like this?
Yeah, so I think concerns from residents tend to be around the stretch code, and they're usually around misconceptions about what it is. Some people are adverse to any increased, what they perceive as increased regulation. So this is, I think, it's more stringent. So that can be, even given an analysis like this that I just showed you, it seems reasonable, I think. People just object to that for whatever reason. So there's that. I think on the town side, there's a concern of just the added work that may be, do you have the bandwidth to apply and then also do the reporting, although it's not, I don't think, a heavy lift, and there's a lot of assistance available between us and the regional planning agencies.
Do you have any, this is a hard question, do you have any sense of man hours?
Yeah, it is a hard question. I mean, I would say to become designated, you should think about it as, it depends on when you start. If you start early enough, then it could be reasonably done with, a good hour or two a week of dedicated time by somebody. I think that would do it, but I think that would be average. You could have weeks where you need to spend a good half a day to a day that week working on stuff. It really depends on where you are, because some towns, you're a smaller town, so the good news is you have less information you need to gather. The bad news is you probably have less resources, but it depends on where that is, because some folks, even bigger cities, it's wow, it's amazing, they actually in some ways are appreciative of the process, because it's people don't even know where our gas bills are, so there's that. So if that's the state that you're in, then it can take longer to find all that stuff. So it's hard, but I think with the regional planning agency assistance, you're getting a lot of a big boost there, where it's really important on the town side is you need somebody who knows who to ask to find the bill. Like, MVPC can't do that. So that at some point they need to be getting the information from somebody, and it also on the school side. And it can vary. I mean, some towns do it purely volunteers, really push it through, working with town employees. And some it's the planning department, many it's the planning department, some it's the facilities, some it's DPW. So it really there's a huge variety. I can't remember what are the main concerns?
It was the challenges that towns like Georgetown, our
Yeah, I think
size,
that-
the hurdles we have to go through, and then, what you have heard, and you address some of those,
I think some of the hurdles once you become a green community can be, again, being able to. Smaller towns may not be able to come in and year out. We actually suggest that towns look at it as almost like an every other year grant. If you can apply to the competitive grant round every other year, that's pretty good. And we suggest that for a couple reasons. One is that we don't want our grant timeline to cause towns to rush through projects, because rushing through projects can cause issues. You won't get the savings that you expect. And then on the other end of that, you're rushing to get a grant application in, and so your application may not be as strong as it could be. So we hope people take their time, but we also appreciate and realize that having $250,000 available every year is a strong
Incentive.
motivator. Yeah. So there's ways to strategize around that and trying to pick the right projects that are maybe less complicated. Maybe one big project instead of 6 smaller projects, because then there's less, maybe less complication or potential for complication.
Yeah, sure.
And making sure. So I think that the other challenge that smaller towns hit is just having the bandwidth to manage the projects. If your facilities departments are slim to none, or if they're already overtaxed, if you put on them another project to manage, then you just want to be aware of that and make sure that you have the bandwidth to manage what you need to manage.
That's probably the biggest question.
I'm feeling pretty good about this.
It's a great idea. I think that's my biggest question is just the time commitment and, because this is just me, but I don't see it happening through volunteers. I think, it's probably gonna happen with John, and the concern with John is.
It's like, how much can you do?
Yeah,
How much can he do?
Right.
And that's the challenge in
But
small
John's
towns.
very creative. You could find interns or something along those lines.
Yeah.
I mean,
Plus,
it
it's a
doesn't sound like
collaborative
rocket
effort,
science.
too,
It
with
sounds
other-
like
Joe,
accounting. And
It's a collaborative effort with other
Joe
department heads
Cosgrove
too.
at Merrimack Valley Planning, is Joe Cosgrove the one that does that with you?
Not anymore,
Oh,
as of March 15th.
so is he,
Yeah, he's leaving,
okay,
but he was the person.
okay.
So whoever replaces Joe would be the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if MVPC didn't have someone available, then you could work with another regional planning agency potentially to do that. I mean, we'd like to keep it with MVPC because you've worked with them, you have a relationship with them, they know the town. But Joe's done it, and I'm available whether you worked with MVPC or not, but it sounds like you would, but I'm there for technical assistance as well. But where I think MVPC where it really can be helpful is it's not only getting all your data together and your baseline together, but then it's in helping to organize whatever audits need to get done, but it's really consolidating all that information and writing the plan, and that's where if John is more of an editor rather than having to put that together, that can be a huge help.
Is the application on the computer that we can see an example of?
Yeah, I can send you guys, we have guidance documents for each criteria. We have example energy reduction plans from different types of towns. The energy reduction plans are real, it's very much a template in many ways. So it's just, you just need to fill in the relevant information for your town and your plan. It's not, color by numbers, but there's, between the example plans that we have in our guidance, it's not, you don't need to come up with anything that we're not providing for you.
Yeah, like I would like to see what Boxford application was,
Yeah,
how they went about it, what are they going to receive?
Sure. I mean, I can, in one plan I can show you, like Merrimack just became a green community. And they did, they did their plan through with MVPC, and talk about a town with lack of resources, not a lot of folks working in town hall. I mean, great people, but they just don't have a lot of people there.
Right.
So I always think, but not a lot of buildings. So that their plan may be a good one to share with you. We have some other MLP ones, but bigger towns like Belmont, I think, is one that we have available. That's a good plan. So yeah, we can show you, similar size towns, and
Yeah.
Boxford did it through MVPC, and a volunteer really pushed it. A chair of a volunteer committee. They had an energy committee in place.
Right.
And certainly was given support from town employees, but he and that committee really pushed it.
Well, Rob, it sounds like your effort for climate change, this is in the same ballpark.
Yeah, it's right direction, yeah.
I was thinking of that before the meeting tonight.
Yeah.
I have a question. Obviously, there have to be some sort of presentation at town meeting. Correct? Would you be involved with that?
I can go to town meeting. Often at town meeting, what usually I think can be better is that someone who's not me presents the article and the
Right.
idea, and is a proponent for passing it, and I'm available there to answer questions.
A local champion is definitely.
Yeah.
That's
But like for the
Right.
for the,
But if there are questions out
Specific,
there
yeah.
to answer, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
available to answer questions. So I wouldn't say, I mean, I could present on it and provide some information, but ideally it would be someone from the town would talk about what the stretch code is, not to this level, but and why, and really it's like in most town meetings, it's the reason we want to do this is because it'll make this funding
advantages.
available,
Yeah.
and it seems worth it. But then,
Oh, and by the way, we're gonna save the planet too, but don't worry about it.
yeah, well, yeah, hopefully
Don't focus.
that can be part of the conversation. On it, I mean, the economic argument is usually the one that
That's the
people
bottom
care
line.
about. So emissions reductions, is not something that we tend to spend a lot of time talking about, unfortunately. Even though it's really important. I think that along those lines, one thing I will mention is, and this, again, you don't need to be a designated green community to benefit from this, but I think being a green community does loop Georgetown in a little, makes a stronger connection between Georgetown and our office, and connects, there's a network of green communities that all start working together and collaborating with one another and sharing ideas, and so
It's a great channel for
I
developing
have,
that.
yeah, I have
network.
quarterly meetings, we just had one, and again, you could participate in this type of networking without being a green community, but it's sort of a natural extension of it. But for example, at the quarterly meetings that we have, one town presented on some outreach programs that they did to increase senior citizens doing home energy audits and energy efficiency measures in their homes. And as a result of sharing that at the meeting, two more towns are doing a similar program now, and sort of taking that model and applying it to their town. So that's the type of thing that is really, satisfying for me to see, that it's not just that people are bragging about what they're doing, but other people are taking those ideas and going and running with it. And it can save you some work too, If you say to me, has anyone ever done this? Then hopefully someone has, or I can at least ask.
It's quite remarkable, I think, the number of communities that are
I was
already
Yeah.
surprised how many actually.
signed in.
Yeah, there are a
And
lot.
We're one of the minority at this point.
Yeah, again, I mean, you do have a very good reason. And that, I think that early on when this first started, my guess is if people in Georgetown were aware of it, then they just said, oh, we can't do it because we're municipal light. And then it just sort of fell away, disappeared. And so in the Northeast region, there are only three municipalities left that are utility service that aren't green communities. All of the other non-green communities in my territory are municipal light plant communities. So that's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
bring them in.
Yeah, yeah.
And the first step is you have a customer, and you do. So
There, right now, I'm thinking that the only thing that we're gonna need to go to town meeting for, if we were to move forward with this, the only thing we'd need for town meeting is the stretch code adoption,
yep,
and potentially, maybe, the by right siting for, R&D or.
Right.
Or energy facilities.
yep,
Is that right?
yeah. But I don't think
get all
you'll
the other
have to go
numbers?
for that part. But
I think we wanna look at the definition of
Yeah.
light industrial.
right.
I think we
But
wanna look at that.
But yeah, but town meeting, the only required, if your zoning's fine, then stretch code. If your zoning's not fine, you'd have to do a zoning bylaw.
Overlay district somewhere.
Right,
And then stretch code.
right. And we have, for stretch code, we have, a model bylaw and article language. And, our hope is that you copy and paste it, because there are times where that doesn't happen, and then we have to. maybe
as you
put-
said, you indicated developers pretty much adhere to that at present.
By and large,
I mean, they're working on.
I don't hear a lot of resistance from builders and developers. I don't wanna say that
Right,
there aren't some out there, but for the most part now, from both building inspectors and builders, usually the reaction is we're already doing it. So, it's not a big deal.
and certainly there's so many communities nearby that are green communities that people have developed over here.
Yeah, it's just if you have a builder who only builds in Georgetown,
Which probably isn't the case. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we'd have to do a hearing anyway. We'd have to come for the warrant article. We'd have to do a hearing here, and I'm sure, you wouldn't mind coming to
Yeah.
that to help us out.
And again, we could do a hearing, or you can also do like during the day, you can have an informational session for builders or stakeholders, and we can come out and talk to them then. I think in terms of the Board of Selectmen, it's really, if I present to them or present similar information to what I presented to you tonight to the Board of Selectmen, it's always great when you talk about stretch code, to have the building inspector there to say,
I would hope he'd be at the hearing,
yeah.
and knowing Les, I think he probably would.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah, so that's I think, to use the term, like politically, I think the stretch code is the one that takes a little work in terms of just making sure people understand what it is, because you need to vote. So then the only what needs approval by the Board of Selectmen and the schools is the vehicle policy and the energy reduction plan. But they would just vote for it at one of their regular meetings. So you just want to time, I should have mentioned, our application is usually due at the end of October. So if you were to apply this year, you would want to be ready to submit everything to us at the end of October. So it would just be timing it, your energy reduction plan, so you're getting something to the Board of Selectmen, you know, before that application date, and hopefully at least baking in a meeting between the time they're voting and that application date. So if for whatever reason you need to come back to them, you have that meeting to come back to them.
Well, our water and our electric is separate entities, so would they each have to have one?
So we don't care about water. It's only gas. It's energy. So it's gas
Electric,
and delivered fuels, oil, propane,
not the electric either.
and electric.
So you do, so
Yeah.
they would, they were not under the jurisdiction of the selectmen, they're separate.
I mean,
They're
The
their own
electric department.
entity.
We have a municipal light department,
yeah, I know, but
enterprise.
but the Board of Selectmen are the ones that would approve the energy reduction plan, because right now, if you wanted to do an HVAC upgrade in this building, the municipal light department, I assume, doesn't approve that.
They're not involved with this building,
Right.
yeah.
Even
So,
though they provide the electricity, it's the decision of the Board of Selectmen in the town on what you're doing.
uh,
This
In
is
those
an energy
buildings.
this is an energy reduction plan for the town.
right,
It's not, the only involvement of the municipal light plant is to provide, you know, at the very base level, is to provide account information to you so we can find out what your use is. And they're providing the power.
Mhm.
But they don't need to approve the energy reduction plan.
okay.
Mike Farrell would know, he was, I don't know if he was the point person, but for when, you know, we went through this exercise before.
Was
He
that
was.
a 20-year contract? To reduce energy with
It
a
sounds,
private company?
it was with a private company and it was for a number of years.
Yeah,
I don't
that's the
remember
one I'm
what, but-
referring to.
That
Did
was
you have
the
a
predecessor to this
performance
green committee.
contract?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we went our own way, and, you know, everybody else was
Yeah.
doing.
Like 10 years ago?
No, it wasn't
Not
that
that
long
long.
ago.
Okay.
but it-
Sure.
Yeah, I think it
Well,
may
maybe
be.
time goes flying by.
I don't know, it
I
doesn't
know.
seem like it was 10 years ago.
It doesn't seem like it, but
It
you know what?
That involved
Could be.
trying to put new windows in this building.
Right,
That's true, that's true.
Turned out to be too costly. Because the windows have to comply with the historical standards, and
So I,
this building could use.
so I assumed, so I saw,
Especially the
you know,
last couple
had to
of
do
windy
with
days.
new construction, and renovations were exempt,
Stretch code, yep.
stretch code. I didn't see historic mentioned in there, and when John just mentioned that, I'm assuming historic is exempt? No?
I mean, it's just what the base code calls for in terms of the energy code.
Okay.
So there's no difference.
Okay.
And if you look, if you go, let's see, go up.
No.
Yeah. Just to show you, see that 26, number 26. So this is the language. I'm not going to read this, but this is the stretch code language, which is an appendix to the base code. But if you look at where it says AA 103.1 R use buildings, residential use buildings of 4 stories or less above grade plane with 1 or above dwelling units, each dwelling unit shall comply with section N1106, blah, blah, blah. What that's saying is any residential building new needs to comply with the performance path. It's saying refer to the performance path, and then it's saying the next one saying large buildings over 100,000 square feet or 40,000 square feet conditioned spaces needs to go to this part. Needs to be 10% better than ASHRAE, which is another measuring stick essentially. And then where it says other new buildings and existing buildings, so where it says existing buildings for alterations, renovations, additions, or repairs, existing buildings in these municipalities, the energy efficiency requirements of, and that's just saying, that's just referring to the existing buildings section of the base code. So that's the stretch code. It's 1 page. It used to be a lot more, but it's just this one-page appendix to the base code.
I think there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction to that term, stretch code.
Did we get that?
Yeah,
Right.
Which is what you were saying, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you've overcome it.
yeah. So that it's overcoming that knee-jerk reaction and making sure you get ahead of it, so it's not overwhelming your town meeting. Because as I'm sure you know, at town meetings,
So with the schools, so we have a new elementary school and that was built within the last 3 years or 2 years, whatever. So that's pretty up to speed. And I think they just got they, as part of that project, they also spent a chunk of money on the middle high school building to upgrade it. And I've noticed that they just got a grant to upgrade Pearlie. So the 3 buildings that house our school systems, I'm guessing are,
right. So if there's a new building, so you can go back to your baseline to fiscal year 17. So that'd be your baseline. So anything that happened after fiscal year 17, so anything that occurred in fiscal year 18 and 19 in terms of energy efficiency projects, you could take credit for. And then if you have things, so the new school,
Yeah.
the new school could be,
16.
the new school could be tricky. There's one strategy that some take with newer buildings where there's a study that we allow folks to reference in an energy reduction plan that says that retro commissioning of buildings can provide anywhere between 7.5% to 15% energy savings. And so we take the low end of that at 7.5%. So it's not unheard of or necessarily a bad idea to retro commission a building that's 3 or 4 years old. So you could, at least to get some savings out of that building, you could reference that study, and that could be a measure in your energy reduction plan. And we would just take 7.5% of the baseline energy use for that building and say that that would be the expected reduction. So you could actually, so it wouldn't be hopefully a total loss in putting your plan together. But then it sounds like with these other schools, it may be stuff that's planned now, or happening now, or planned in the near future. And what's great about that is that if you have measures that are planned in these big energy users, then that's part of your plan now, and you don't have to do, if the work's already been done to identify that stuff,
Yeah.
then that's great.
We'd have to verify the dates, but
Right.
I think they did the middle school, high school at this, right on the heels of when the Pembroke was wrapping up. So we'd have to just check the dates and see.
Yeah, 'cause I think it was like the tail end of
It was
that
it was
project.
like an add-on project, yeah.
But last summer they just did a whole bunch of stuff for the high school too.
Yeah,
I don't know what it was,
I
but,
don't know what that was.
well, they did this,
Right.
security thing, but I think they did other stuff too.
AC's on the roof or something?
Yeah, it was a
Something on the roof?
Yeah.
We did a lot of work with the high school on seeing that to avoid it being so wet. A lot of drainage.
I can just answer
Oh, yeah.
this way.
Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go.
Thank you.
So how do we wanna leave this?
You know what, I'm gonna talk to Les tomorrow. I got a meeting with him and Mike and John Eichman. And, you know, if it's a matter of moving forward quick enough to adopt the stretch code, you know, it looks like it's minimal language that we have to adopt into our present building code. And, you know, this could possibly be done for this annual town meeting. You know, I've talked to Les extensively about this over the last couple of years. And, you know, it isn't something new, it isn't something that isn't being practiced by the builders anyway. So, I mean, everybody's looking to build energy efficient. There's nobody left out there that, you know, doesn't wanna practice that.
No question.
All the
I
equipment
guess
that
in-
all the equipment that contractors buy is labeled energy efficient today. You can't go,
It's a
Home
better
Depot,
product,
you see
it
that all
solves
the time.
faster, you know.
You see it all the
Everything
time.
is energy efficient, that's what you want, so. You know, and I
Right.
did talk to him about this stretch code. You know, it's not a stretch anymore.
So you have, I mean, you have an understanding of this that I don't, and so to me, as I'm listening to all this information, it seems like a lot to do by town meeting. I mean, there are presentations to have, there's a selectman to get on board, there's a bunch of stuff to do. And so maybe you, in having a better understanding of it, can see that happening. I don't have
See,
that.
what happened in this town, you know, this town did go through a long period of time preceding the Green Community Program in making things energy efficient. There was a lot of work put into it, and by the time this program came by, pretty much everybody was worn out, you know. And the issue with the municipal light department and the added cost, now Dave Schofield is well aware of that, you know, that we do have a customer.
Yeah.
So that cost factor isn't a political firecracker anymore.
Right.
You know, it's not, this, by becoming a green community is not going to increase the residential, electric bill. Have that customer.
Yeah, cause that would be a big fight.
That would be the first question, and that would be a.
Even if it was pennies.
It
Yeah.
always
My,
is.
my only reservation, my sole reservation with this right now is that whatever we entered into, when we entered into the energy contract that was, whether it was 10 years ago, I don't remember where it was. I was on the fringes of it, so I don't really know. I remember voting at town meeting for it, and then
We need to understand it.
we need to understand if we're locked into something right now that
Yeah.
might, you know, inadvertently throw a wrench into this.
So I can have a dialogue with Mike about that tomorrow. I mean, Mike is reluctant to get involved with this because it is more work. I mean, he really took care of the last go around.
He did, yeah, he did.
And,
Yeah, but he can dump this one on you.
yeah,
So-
it's accurate. And-
Well, we have a lot of support this time around, where he probably didn't really have support. Makes it a lot harder.
Yeah, and it is a lot of work if you're doing a lot of the stuff yourself, so.
Is it ongoing work, or is it mostly that initial baseline data capture?
It's really that baseline, getting everything put together.
Mm-hmm.
And
The
then,
application's the biggest, the heaviest lift. The requirement, the reporting requirements, so once you're designated, every green community files an annual report with us, but you don't need to do that until 18 months after your designation, the first time, and then it's every year. And the annual report is for the most part, it's reporting on your energy use. So it's saying, you know, this is what we used in 2019 compared to our baseline, which
On
is
target to
2017.
20% and 5,
Yeah, so we're just, because we want to track, see how you're doing.
Sure.
And that, if you don't file your annual report, the consequence is that you wouldn't be eligible to apply for a grant, but you're still a green community. So, you know, some green communities don't file their annual report. And then if you filed it the next year, you would just have to report on the previous year that you missed, as well as that year. So it's not trivial, but it's nothing like the application. And again, we would assist with that. But you need to have it in to us by a certain time to be eligible.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be a green community in good standing, essentially, you know, to apply for the grant.
So I would think that we would be motivated by what you were gonna offer us. Are you gonna give us this money without any recourse, or we would have to set a goal of what we wanna do?
Yeah, you have to apply, you have to become designated,
Yeah,
and then once we don't just give you a check for $140,000 and say,
Right.
knock yourself out.
Oh.
You
Is
say-
there cash in
yeah,
your trunk
sorry.
right now? Can we just go out to the parking lot
Yeah.
and get it, bring it up?
So with the designation grant, it's a little bit, there's a little bit more flexibility on how you spend that money, because that's sort of like your prize for becoming designated. It's more the town's money to spend, but you do have to apply for the funding. You need to fill out an application and say, we want to use this $140,000 for lighting at the elementary school and an electric vehicle and a charging station.
You have
We
to
re-
have your plans.
we review that application, and that's why putting together your energy reduction plan, putting together a good energy reduction plan is smart and important, because then hopefully you're just picking from your energy reduction plan. Let's do these three. And then you do it, and you already have the information there, you send it in, we approve it. We give you the first 25% of the funding, of the full grant amount. Once you spend that first 25, we send the next 50%, and then you get the last 25% once everything's completed. And that's the same in terms of the disbursement of the funds. That's what we do with competitive. But with competitive, the competitive rounds, with designation, it's, you know, you have $140,000 and you're telling us how you want to spend it. With competitive, it's, there's up to $250,000 available to you, and you tell us how you want to spend it. You know,
That's what I need.
you're applying for
Ideas,
projects.
And I think that'll take a while.
And the project will cost this much, and
This is
the
the
same-
project we want to do. This is our backup documentation for why it's going to cost this much from this audit that we had. This is the projected energy savings. You know, but hopefully that's the information that you got in your energy reduction plan. You know,
Could you,
You said most of this, I think I heard you say most of this is geared towards, to the buildings.
Mhm.
How much or how difficult is it to target it towards projects, not building, you know, for example, a solar farm?
Yeah, so you'll be surprised to hear that not in the competitive rounds, really not at all. Like renewable energy projects, we don't really fund. In your designation grant, we might. In your designation grant, we might fund a study for something like that.
okay.
But in terms of the competitive grants, at least up until this point, we haven't really funded renewable projects. We have on occasion.
Why?
The program started really as it's an energy reduction program, and energy efficiency is just like the main
That was the first
focus.
step, yeah.
And I think that early on, the decision was made that that would be the focus, and that also there were enough incentives in the renewable side of things that people should be doing that
Yeah.
anyways.
How old is the program?
The reason I bring that up is I don't, again, we need to understand what's taking place and the buildings that we have and what we can do with the buildings that we currently have. I don't know how much is there.
To save,
Yeah,
because we're at that point where we're,
yeah,
yeah, it's a concern.
yeah, and I'm not taking that anywhere, but that's why I was asking about projects.
Yeah, I
versus
think
just
that's that's often a concern. I think that you need to do the plan to find out where you are to
Sure.
know.
And Mike will have a lot of that baseline information, but he's not gonna have it with regards to our schools, which would come from the school committee. The school committee would know very well. Carol or Barbie would know.
I do have a couple of draft motions in the staff report, and
Saw
I'm
that.
thinking the second one
I'm-
may be
I'm-
something.
I'd be
and-
happy to make that motion, Mr.
and-
Chairman, the second motion.
and
if you'd like
Harry,
to
if
do
I
that.
could just add that, the first few words coming in that motion would be, I move for the planning board
Ah,
to take the matter.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
I did want to ask, when did this program start?
Well, Neil is here.
2010 was the first year that there were designated green communities.
I ask because it is interesting that funding of power generation is really not in the charter, as it were. But 10 years ago, the efficiency of a lot of solar was not like it is now.
Correct.
This is technology
Right.
that's rocking and rolling.
Yeah, so
No, I have.
there are certain limitations to the program, and part of it is because of what it's become, and then part of it is because of what we're not able to do based on what the legislation says. And so we try to do the best we can
Sure.
within those limitations.
And I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't evolve into something to
including
To-
renewables.
Yeah, to panel your buildings. The church
Yeah.
I go to in North Andover, it's a 180-year-old church, and they just put solar panels on. And they had to go through the whole historical society, but
Right.
this can be done and not damage the visage of the
Yeah.
building.
But I would just say that, you know, again, so your designation grant, you could do studies for those types of projects. I think those meta grants that I mentioned, I would definitely look into that if there are particular projects that you're interested in exploring that you may not have information on. I think those meta grants are really useful to get some better information on what may be just an idea now.
Do- Can those monies be, like, if there were 50 people in town, but private residences, that were interested in solar panels? How would, or is that a disconnect?
Yeah, that's, yeah, no,
No way.
right.
It has to be
I'm-
part of the town.
Couldn't be like a mini grid?
But you could do like a, in terms of a feasibility study, like a community shared solar, like
Yeah.
if there was a solar
Mini grid,
farm.
yeah.
You could, meta grants will pay for that, you know, how would that look, what would the, not only like where would it be, but you could also pay for like what are the economics of that type of, setup, cause that's where it's really hard, that's hard stuff to figure
Yeah.
out.
And you're saying that it's not that, I'm sorry, that,
No, go ahead, and then we'll just,
you're saying that there, to your knowledge, is not a prohibition to funding things such as that. It's just, historically, it has not been
It's
funded.
not been
because
funded,
of
yeah,
the
and certainly in the
nature of
competitive, really, when
Yeah,
the
the nature of it.
competitive round is competitive, even though we tend to fund almost all of the projects that get applied for,
Right.
The
at least
secret
up
of that
till
was,
now.
yeah.
So, but it is one of the criteria that we're really almost the sole criteria we're looking for is like, what are the energy savings? And it's, again, it sort of goes back to when this was first created. It was developed to motivate energy reduction.
Mhm.
And that's really like the core of it, and I think that also just shows you sort of how conversations have shifted over the last 10 years, where that really was the focus then was, I mean, it still is a focus, but efficiency and emissions reductions, and now it's that, but also renewables and resiliency and adaptation. You know, we're already talking about adapting rather than mitigating.
it's already been assumed.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So,
So with that, Harry?
If you'll hear it, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that I move for the planning board to take the matter of the Georgetown becoming a state designated green community under advisement and pending further review, determine Georgetown should take the steps necessary to become a state designated green community.
Second.
Motion has been made and it has been seconded, as just stated. Any discussion? No discussion, all in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, Neil.
great.
Yeah,
Really
thanks a
interesting.
lot.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you very
time.
much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
I did give Neil that handout that everybody has that Harry made available to us initially through the email, the $1 billion that
Yeah.
the state.
Yeah, I saw that in the paper too.
We all
Yeah.
cut, we
Pretty cool,
all,
huh?
we all cut it out.
It's cool. I mean,
I didn't cut it out, but I read it in the
cut mine
paper.
out.
What a bunch of wonks we are, huh?
I don't know. I don't know where that money's going. Believe me, when I saw that announcement, I said, "Hey,
Just wait till you get all that Green New Deal money, though.
yeah, that's right." Green New Deal's gonna put me out of business.
I don't know. Find a new business. Bigger business.
Are you guys doing MVP? Is Georgetown an MVP community? I can't remember. Do you know?
No, Mike might be aware of it, but
So if you're interested in climate change stuff, I mean that's another program.
What did you call it?
It's called MVP. It's Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness.
yeah.
You didn't know that, huh?
So it's similar to green communities, where you become designated as an MVP community. The first round of grants are planning grants, so you get a grant to become an MVP community, and what that is again working with like MVPC, all the stakeholders in town, so like this is really town departments like police, fire, everybody gets together,
Exactly.
you do workshops, and you identify your vulnerabilities and you put together a climate action plan. And then once you have that climate action
Wow.
plan, and once you're designated as an MVP community, then you're eligible for the action grants. And the first round was just last year. Those are up to $400,000
Wow.
with a 25% match.
So how do I follow up on that?
She's all excited.
I'll send John
It's
the
MVP community.
information.
It's,
Okay,
I can send you, I can
Yeah,
send you the
maybe
proper
vulnerability.
contacts.
vulnerability.
whatever
Yeah,
that
yeah.
process is
Yeah.
to just, I mean, I'm gonna be going over
So it's
from the very
basically
beginning
for
what you just
climate
said.
change.
It's, defining
different
out more
program.
about it
Yeah.
and
Principle
understanding.
I'll send you links in the email, the people that you
But
can
it
talk
just
to.
got
You can
started
always
like
just reach
last
out to
year, so
me
it's
if you
kinda
have any
very new.
questions.
Okay,
That's part of Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, so it's like our secretariat that I'm part of. So.
There's a conference coming up, right? A state-sponsored conference on this
For
this spring.
MVP?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Maybe.
think it
I
is
mean,
in March.
it's been it's a huge focus of the
Oh.
administration
Oh, yeah.
is the resiliency and adaptation stuff. So
well, and I mean, I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the people who are in the low-lying areas, Boston and so on and so forth. They're the ones that are focusing in the towns like Georgetown that are kind of inland and they're not associated with that rise.
Right.
They're not thinking of it that way, but it's this issues of this.
yeah, there are issues.
They're real
Oh,
issues.
yeah,
coming. Real
exactly.
issues coming.
And
We have a
so,
lot of culverts.
I mean, yeah, it's a lot.
Well-
I mean, it's a lot of infrastructure.
We have a river that
Movement.
runs to
There's
the
also
sea.
there's also
That
board
comes
of
up.
health
Yeah.
issues coming
Tide
up,
moves
and
out.
just a slew of, so,
Right,
that's,
heat
thank
island
you for,
effect,
thank you for
all that
mentioning
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
was,
I'll
okay.
send along that information too.
Great.
and will you, link, when you get
Yeah.
that, pass it on?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
have a good night.
You too.
All right, so, we're gonna go on to street acceptance. See,
I didn't understand this. But,
so there's Chaplain Hills, which is one cat,
like, they're not streets, but they are streets. Oh, that's what I didn't understand.
Oh, unless they're waived.
This is the town accepts it.
Yeah.
See, we have,
But- John, could you give an overview of?
Yeah,
what we're gonna-
Okay.
real quickly, there are 4 streets that initially Pete requested the Board of Selectmen to take up for this annual town meeting. The Board of Selectmen are asking the planning board to report on the status of these 4 streets that Pete would like to have listed as publicly accepted ways. I started doing some homework on the files with these, and basically the problem that these roadways that have been around for quite a while now, Chaplain Hills is the newest one, but they were not accepted as public ways because pretty much they fell through the cracks. Chaplain in Longview and Maureen, when I did my homework on this stuff and went through the files, they were all recommended for public acceptance, but there were still issues remaining. Chaplain Hills is done. That was recommended by the planning board for public acceptance. For whatever reason, it never made it onto an annual town meeting as a warrant article for a vote. So,
Nick
that,
Cracknell went through, we pulled the bond for that.
Yeah.
To actually finish it. We hired Artisan Development, they brought it back up to speed. As soon as it was up to speed, at a certain point there,
Yeah.
it was ready to rock and roll, it was ready to go, and then Nick left.
no,
And it
as
just
I
fell off,
remember,
as
he
I
did
remember.
leave then, but
Yeah,
I don't think the neighbors wanted to accept it.
I think perhaps they didn't want it because they were under the impression that maybe that was preventing the development of that very, very large lot at the end.
And I never had any information to show me if they had a legitimate reason to do that. Or
Well,
if
the
it was
reality of it is
relevant.
that the developer did reserve the fee in the road. So it's not, was it?
Yeah.
well, yeah, but that conveyance by the owner at the time, that easement and all the conveyances within the right of way, that was
that
give,
was- it's
yeah,
all set.
that's
I
all
mean,
done too.
Yeah, it's not like you
By
have to
who?
go back.
Who
It's not-
signed it? Because
It's not
they
the
were
derelict
both
fee statute
deceased.
that you have to go back to every one of the owners on the street.
Both owners were deceased, and it was, I think it was left to an estate,
Who's that?
the developers on Chaplain Hill, so that they weren't around to sign anything. Unless it was under an estate and the lawyer did.
Yeah, I think the corporation owned it. And
That was Faraji, which would have been the original person, grant of easement. And
That was up
That's
to
the-
the.
that was recorded too, and that was in 1998, so that was early on that the easement of the right-of-way and its appurtenances were
Yeah,
conveyed over to the town.
exactly, but does it matter if the neighbors don't want it, or do
Well,
they have a say?
it was
and if
approved
they go to town meeting and say nay,
Oh, yeah.
in the town, but that subdivision was approved with the sole intention of it becoming a public way. So it wasn't approved by the board with any intention that it was to remain a private way.
Right.
absolutely.
So,
That should go.
the
Then
town's
another-
the town is plowing that.
So
what's
I'm
the-
just,
It
The
should go
town's
to
taking
town
care
meeting.
of it, then, like, I don't, makes no, so stupid, just seems really stupid.
Well, like he was saying, the neighbors did not want any development, and they didn't want any extension on that road.
So they thought by keeping it private, then you wouldn't put it,
That's,
but
that's
it's already
what I-
done.
And I don't know
so-
if that is true. It didn't sound like, it was the first time I ever heard it, tell you the truth.
It's gone now.
That subdivision was also
Yeah.
approved with the turnaround that's there. It's
Yeah.
right on the plan. It's a temporary
That was
turnaround.
never, that was never that, I didn't think it was that far, because another developer bought it after Faraci passed.
Yeah.
So you got, and he passed. So is that valid because of Faraci's signing off? Is that?
Yeah,
do you
it was
still
conveyed
call
and
that-
it's recorded.
so,
Okay,
so the plans are very clear in what you just said, John, the as-bills, and then the note that
It's taken care of,
jumped
it
out
should be done.
at me were the meeting minutes. This was September 14th, 2011, in the packet that you gave us, and in Chaplain Hills, Harry motioned to release the surety, Tilly seconded it, all in favor, it was unanimous. Nick and Dave Varga inspected, reviewed, and approved the street acceptance plan and as-built plans. They've been revised. The streets will be recommended for street acceptance to the town. Has anything changed from that?
No.
So this one's done.
Yeah, that's the
So-
one that is
so-
done.
So this one, we could all say, let's go ahead with this one.
Yeah.
So can you explain the difference to the other three, though? What's up with
Yeah.
those?
The other three, now, Longview, I'll just bring that up for instance.
That's
right?
an old one, huh?
Now, there's nothing in the packet on those.
No,
That's an old one, though.
just, yeah, but this is what I came up with this one, and it's short and sweet. And this was written by Kathleen Bradley Cowell,
Caldwell,
yeah.
yeah,
God,
Planner.
wow,
the
okay,
planner, yeah.
okay.
At their meeting of, and this is the planning board, February 13, 2002, the planning board voted to request that the selectmen place Longview Way along with Blue Woods on the warrant for acceptance as a public street. What happened was with Longview, a draft as-built plan has been submitted for review. A site visit will need to be performed. However, the board believes that any remaining issues will be resolved prior to town meeting. The developer of the project will be granting easements to the town. And this is like most up-to-date.
That's all you have, huh?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, so everything else to finalize
You don't know
is
where
just
it is.
still up in the air.
Do you have any copies of any of the easements?
Yeah,
File?
there's a lot of documentation
Okay.
in that file. See, just so that you know, there is a standard by which stuff happens, and actually does happen. We approve a subdivision plan, it's inspected, gets final approval, as-built plans. The board takes final action, passes it to the Board of Selectmen with the recommendation, everything's done, as-built plans accepted. This street is ready for for acceptance as a public way. That's the perfect process, and it does happen that way in a lot of communities. There were so many old ancient roadways that, being maintained, but they're not accepted. Here we have 4 relatively modern roadways that the final product of going from planning board recommendation to annual town meeting and being accepted there as public ways isn't happening, you
Well,
know, in
would-
any type of
to-
organized process.
To fine tune though what you just said, it sounds like that's true in a perfect explanation of Chaplain Hills.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like for Longview, and I'm guessing Maureen and Martell, that it sounds like that, the last communication you have on that is, there's a lot of vagaries around it.
Yeah, and it is an old one, you know,
I mean,
last
Longueview's been around for a
communication is
while.
2002. Maureen's even older, however, it was just last year that formal communication was sent out, planning office, to the applicant, informing the applicant that there are still outstanding issues.
On Maureen?
Yeah,
We had Larry Graham review it.
that's right.
We had Larry Graham review it.
But I think when you go back
And
to
we
the
had
process
a punch
you were
list.
referring to,
and
I was under the impression that the
was
planner
supposed to be-
would
Who was supposed
collect
to
whatever
collect?
he could
The town?
and send it to John Eichman or town council.
Developer.
Oh, the owner of the
Yeah.
building.
And to see if there's missing
So that's what it
documents.
is.
And then he would notify.
Well, it's all part of
You
that
care, but this has-
formal process. Planning board finally moves to accept the roadway as complete.
And in the meantime, we would send it also to the selectmen to put on the warrant.
Right.
At the same time, and
And-
it would be voted.
Yeah, and at that time, though,
It
at
wa-
that time, it's up to the Board of Selectmen to send all of the paperwork to town
That's
council.
too late. You know why I'm saying that? I don't think we waited for them because that's what they did. They waited till the last minute when everything went in the package. Anything that was on the warrant was it together, and then went to him. So, but there's a time frame after the vote. Does not mean it's accepted.
Yeah. Now, I did send an email, as I mentioned in the staff report, to John Eichel, explaining everything. And he got back to me with his answer.
Was his answer in this report?
No.
It's not.
No.
Okay.
But his answer consists of this. The Board of Selectmen requests the planning board to submit a report on the status of these roadways.
Okay.
Okay, relative to what we have come up with the status of the roads, so that they can move them onto the annual town meeting for a vote of the town to accept. We can also not send them anything, and the Board of Selectmen can move these roadways along without any input.
Well, we should have provide input.
No, I know, but we have 45 days to do that. So
After the vote, is that what you're saying? When do you have the 45 days?
from when they recommend, or request, when they request
Okay.
the board to start reviewing, and once we finish our review, that has to be done within 45
They
days.
have not made that request yet?
No, they have. They have. Yeah, so the 45-day clock
Already
is
started.
running.
That's why this is before us right now.
That's right,
Right.
right. Now,
So Chaplain Hills would be something where the board would say, you know, check.
Yeah.
Go ahead on that one. And on the other 3, Longview Way, it sounds like that documentation of 2000, and what was the date?
two.
2002, it's not ready. And there needs to be a lot more research done to figure out where it does stand. And this,
Rob, did I not hear, do we not have as-built? We have as-built?
Yeah,
to Longview,
yeah. There's a lot of documentation, and everything was done. And then what happened was, as it states here, believes that the remaining issues will be resolved. Well, they weren't.
Okay.
In time for the annual
So
town
that's what I
meeting.
mean,
Nice
there are
statement.
issues, and we
We
don't,
have them enumerated, we know what the remaining issues are.
we don't know if they were done or not.
We don't know if they were done, but we do know what they are.
Right.
So, would it behoove us to send Larry out to take a peek? As we did with Maureen Lane.
Who's gonna pay for, who pays for that?
See,
That's
people,
what our budget's
people,
about.
people
That's why we have
not,
that in our budget.
no,
For things like
people
that.
not up to speed with the legal requirements of everything, think that it's just, make them a public way. Oh, yeah, and send out that request, 2 weeks before the deadline for annual town meeting, you know, be able to do it all. No, you can't.
Yeah.
These files are this thick.
Absolutely.
And the remaining, Larry Graham, he did what he was supposed to do, check
Yeah.
off what's remaining out there. And then
When do
Nobody
everything
does it.
stopped at that point.
when do we have to respond to the selectmen? What's the date for it?
What I would like to recommend to this planning board is that I finalize, going through the file, compiling pertinent data, documents, and putting those documents together and with the summarization of the status of each one,
Oh.
and just give it to them. And
Give it to the selectmen?
yeah,
Well,
that's not a
but-
recommendation,
But that,
though.
no, but I would say give it to us, so that we can then add our 2 cents onto it. We recommend, we don't recommend.
Yeah.
I don't wanna just
well,
leave it up to them.
the only one I could tell you that you could recommend for public acceptance
Is
at this
Chaplain.
annual,
At
yes,
this point.
Chaplain Hill.
Well, that's
yeah.
kinda what I keep jumping to.
Okay.
Yeah, Longview, Maureen, and Martell,
Definitely have issues.
unfortunately, are not going to meet this year's deadline to get onto the Springtown meeting.
So that,
Yeah, it's not
Mr. Chairman,
happening.
I'd like to make a motion, if I may.
just one sec.
Sure.
But, so I think everybody is in understanding and agreement that Chaplain Hills is, we've got the information we need to recommend it. The other three, there's a chunk of work that needs to be done. We can't recommend them right now. Okay, everybody's on the same page. Go ahead. Harry?
And the difference with Chaplain, not only do we have the as-built plans that they were signed off on, the board was completely signed off on, and as documented, we
Yeah.
have the street acceptance plans too.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, everything
So-
has been done. That's really unfortunate that just
It's just,
fell out of
it-
place.
it-
Didn't make it to town
Yeah.
meeting, that's all.
Harry,
And then, that we got changed. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, and that motion would be, to, reply to the Board of Selectmen and recommend, to accept as a public way Chaplain Hills Road.
short and sweet, nice.
Second.
Can I mention, if you wanna leave it at that?
No, go ahead, I can add to
And
it.
for the other
With
three
respect
roads.
to the other three, explain to
Sure,
them.
Yeah,
being
namely-
rejected
Yeah.
because,
Yeah,
the board will
we are
consider-
not recommending street acceptance
We're-
at this
we're
time
not.
because outstanding,
Outstanding
I would,
issues.
so I think what you said was perfect. One
Yeah.
period, done. Now make another motion
Oh,
after
okay,
that.
sure,
that we-
let's do one,
yeah.
Just
Do I
Chaplain.
have a second?
Second.
So a motion has been made and seconded to recommend to the selectmen to accept as a public way Chaplain Hills Road. Any discussion? No discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? And then one more motion, Harry?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we reply to the request of the Board of Selectmen and refrain from recommending the other three that they were talking, refrain from recommending Longview Way, Maureen Lane, and Martell Way until such time as
Outstanding issues.
outstanding issues can be corrected.
Second.
So a motion has been made and it's been seconded to
Not
not recommend
recommend. Longview, Maureen, and Martell.
Longview Way, Maureen Lane, and Martell Way for acceptance as a public way until outstanding
Issues can be
issues
resolved.
can be resolved.
Can I have a discussion on that?
Yep,
I have a
discussion.
question. Would it be all right if the building inspector, excuse me, Peter Durkee, checks out these roads because they're old?
Well, I think that's part of maybe one of the things that needs to be part of checking out these roads, but it falls into the camp of, there's a lot of work to do, so we can't recommend them right now. Peter may be one of the things that does need to do, but they're not gonna make it for recommendation,
Yeah, well,
because Peter can't.
because he
See,
probably
from-
can't resolve some of the issues.
Yeah, so from Peter's perspective, is that these roads are already being
Plowed.
maintained by the town.
Yep.
And he needs them to be adopted as public ways so we can
Yes.
include them with the chapter 90 monies, which are
Right.
based on publicly accepted streets and the miles thereof.
I mean, we wanna get them
How much-
accepted if he's plowing them,
Yeah.
So
or that he
We've
should
had a-
stop plowing them, but.
these
Stop
names
plowing.
of streets
Yeah.
came from Peter, not the selectmen.
They-
We got it from the selectmen, but Peter gave it to the
That's
selectmen.
correct, yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking they could give us a sign off from Peter if he recommended.
It's not up to him
His
to sign
decision.
off on this. This is where John's gotta go through his research of what's outstanding and identify issues, and then we would have our technical review agent, who's the qualified professional, to go out there to review and see if the roads have been built according to plan and spec and all that sort of stuff.
And again, Longview is pretty close. There's just minor stuff involved with that, and Larry probably can clean that up.
Wasn't Longview on the hit list? Remember we had a map years ago? Does anybody remember the map that showed the the streets that we were going to try
I
to?
remember a review of that.
Yeah, and we did it by, bang for
That
the
list.
buck. For the longest streets were hit first, and Longview was either like,
Not to be confused with Long Hill.
excuse me. Excuse
Long
me.
Hill's another one.
I'm
Right.
surprised
Okay.
Peter didn't send us a note about it, because,
Well,
and he
Well, the
could've-
last time he did that with Maureen Lane, we didn't take a thing either, because it has issues. It still has issues.
Yeah.
Can we move that question?
So, question moved, no more discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Mr.
Okay,
Chairman,
that
just-
takes
not-
care
not-
of
just not
street
to- Not to
acceptance.
just drop that, but
Mhm.
let's to, and I know John's plates overflow, but that's something that on the back burner, but
no, we have to make it.
on the whiteboard,
Yeah, this-
definitely.
It has to be a constant exercise of getting all of these.
One a year.
Yeah, or
One a year.
even more, but
If you
know,
can hit two,
see,
you're
what we did with Chaplin,
overachiever.
Chaplin was easy because it's a newer one, and the documentation was right there.
Sure.
Just open up the file. The other ones went down to the ground zero, pulled out the boxes, and
The fact you were reading this from 2002, I was sitting over here thinking,
It's
wow.
almost 20
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
15 years.
It's amazing you found the
well,
files.
it's really weird because some of the correspondence was written by moi.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that was that
Not a lot.
period of time?
Yeah, not a
Wow.
lot, but I'm like, oh,
That's
geez,
kinda
I wrote
funny.
this. I remember this.
Okay, so let's move
still
on
can't
to
spell that word.
planning office, and, we
Computers
have
are better though.
two items on planning office. Looks like Palmer Lane subdivision, they have an extension request to 13th of March. I don't see anyone here tonight saying otherwise, so get a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
I-
I'll extend a motion to extend the tabling of the discussion of the affordable housing component and surety reduction to March 13th.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to extend the table discussion of the reduced surety for Palmer Lane subdivision to March 13th, 2019. Any discussion? No discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
And then, John, you want to
Okay, real quick.
talk about that one?
Okay. Erosion and stormwater control regulations that are going to be winding up probably tomorrow night. We're gonna have probably our last meeting, and
Great job, guys. I haven't seen it yet, but great job in advance. So,
how many years has this been in the wanting?
2016, we passed this? We modified.
No, that's when we got
That's
responsible.
when we took over.
But we do have the regs, and the good news is that all we need to do to adopt them is a public hearing of this planning board. It's not an annual town meeting requirement, and I just got that verified by Eichmann.
Oh, wonderful.
So that helps. And then these other amendments that I'm ready to talk about this evening, and we're at the deadline, believe it or not, relative
Yeah, I was
to
just gonna
advertising zoning amendments.
what is the
What-
deadline?
Question.
We have to have pretty much everything ready to go, delivered as zoning amendments. We want to go on the annual town meeting April 1st. So we have tonight to consider these proposed amendments, if the board wants to do so, and schedule a public hearing, and the public hearing right now would be for the second meeting in March. These are, the first two are minor.
I'm not so sure. But go ahead.
Now, in collaborating constantly with Les Button, these two items are on his list. These first two items were on his list of zoning amendments that he's recommending for adoption to better clarify the definition of building and the definition of building height.
So, John, these two amendments are being recommended and requested to be brought before us for town meeting by the building inspector, the guy that we trust to make sure that the zoning's all right.
Bless you.
Yeah. And,
Okay, good.
and actually, if you want to do this at this hour, that's great with me, I'm fine, because what we're doing with this building definition is shortening it up. It's funny, when you read the existing one, it mentions height. Well, the next definition down is building height. So why would you bother mentioning building height in the definition of building? So what's being proposed is, this would be the new definition for building: a structure forming a shelter for persons, animals, property, or activity, and having a roof. Where appropriate, in the context of the word building, shall include the principal accessory uses to which the building is put. Now, that's the exact same language that's already within the present definition for building. Okay, so I'm not adding anything to it. What's being proposed is taking out the second and last sentence of the definition for building. And you can read that quick. The limit of height of all buildings shall be 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet. The limitation of height in feet shall not apply to chimneys, ventilators, skylights, bulkheads, and other necessary features usually carried above roofs. Now, that's being stricken because it's talking about heights in what is most important in that definition for building right now as it exists. It's limiting building height to 35 feet, which is a contradiction within the schedule of dimensions, which allows for some buildings to be 45 feet in height, others to be 40. And, that's nowhere to have inclusion of building height within the definition of building. That comes in the definition of building height, which comes next. And then building height, see that at the bottom?
Limitation of building height in feet.
Yeah, so the next page gives you actually the definition of building height with the present language staying in place. And the only thing that's changing is adding the bold language. And what I'm recommending here is that the limitation of building height in feet as provided in section 165.3, attachment 3, intensity of use schedule, shall not apply to chimneys, ventilators, skylights, bulkheads, and other necessary features usually carried above roofs. So what it's doing is making reference to the intensity of use schedule, which gives you all the different height allowances, story allowances per district. And that's what it's making reference to. So it's gonna be an easy definition. Oh yeah, I have to go to that schedule to see what height is allowed in that zoning district. And by the way, all of these ancillary projections that usually go beyond the height limit, those don't apply. So,
Can I have clarification of a
Sure.
question about it? This would prevent someone from filling in to raise the house, but if they filled in with dirt and they had a basement already built, you only would start measuring from
the average,
the top of the fill, right?
yeah.
Am I right?
That's the wording we added the last time. That's the average undisturbed natural grade.
That was when it got revised last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
We're
that
not
language
touching that
stays
now.
in there.
We're not touching that.
Right. that language stays in there, that's part of the first
So
sentence.
it's not going to prevent anybody from doing that, or it already does?
It already does.
It already does, so you can't do that.
Can't do that.
Can't do that.
Not anymore.
So if someone builds a building of appropriate height and decides to put an antenna on the top, is that a necessary feature usually carried above the roof?
We could add antenna.
Well, I'm a little hesitant to do that in light of the discussions
Well-
we've had last couple of meetings.
Well, no, and it does specify, shall not apply to chimneys, ventilators, skylights, bulkheads, and other necessary features usually carried above.
Which would be the antenna.
Yeah, I could put a 20-foot cooling tower on top of my industrial
That's-
building, 40 plus 60, makes 60. That's just,
Other necessary features.
yeah, well, it's a necessary feature, it's a
Yeah.
cooling tower.
Well, I mean, we've been talking a lot about
cool my
this phone repeater, the cellular 4G antennas. And I mean, that's not big, but if that needs to be high, you can go on top of a stick on the top of a building, and I'm wondering if that might technically be allowed under this.
These small cell antennae, the vertical distance above the grade, it's 40 feet. That's the height they need to establish. And they don't really go much higher than that. That's why the whole technology is proposed for existing telephone poles.
You know, it just to Bob's, and this is where it's like, it's like a can of worms, and on the one hand, I wanna keep the can closed and just go with what Harry said, which is, Les has done this, you trust and rely on Les in this one, and just say yes. Opening the can, so, other necessary features, in what Bob was bringing up, if you added in and other necessary features,
Keep in mind, that's the existing language now. If you
Correct.
flip back the page, right?
Yeah.
We already
Correct.
have that in
Yeah,
there.
it's just in a different section.
correct,
Well-
correct, but it doesn't address what
Oh,
Bob just
no,
brought up.
never did.
And so I'm saying if you added in other necessary features specific to that building, specific to that building's
Oh, I
requirements.
gotcha, so that way,
So then you can't, if you added something simple like that. you could-
like the 4G's not for that, just that building, yeah,
So you can put things on your building if they're for your building,
for use in that building.
yeah.
Keep in mind, we have to hold a public hearing for this, right?
Right.
Yeah. And
But-
any changes we'd wanna make, we could make it that night, right? That's how it works. That's-
How about,
that's the
how
whole-
about just adding this, that, in other necessary features specific?
Yeah, that's good,
Specific
to that
to that
building.
building.
Yeah.
The previous one too, I believe we have a definition for
Necessary features
structure.
usually carried
Is
above.
that correct?
Oh, yeah, so it would be in other necessary, features usually carried above roofs and specific
To the building.
to the building.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Ordinances are so tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we get some of the darnest questions at town meeting.
Yeah, no, and they're all legitimate, it's just, you really can't just cut and paste.
Now, the last one, if we want to move on, I
Yeah.
don't know, you ready? The last one is something we talked about at the last year, when we amended the definition for continuous building area. Now, as you can see in the attachment, that's attachment 3, that's the present intensity of use schedule. You can find this at 12, the first column, minimum lot requirements, that's in bold. Then you go down, area, in parentheses, 1,000 square feet. And then there's the 12, it's a footnote 12.
I'm sorry, John, start over again.
Right here. It's talking right here.
Minimum lot area requirements, area 1,000 square feet.
And then there's a 12 right there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And as this note 12 is interpreted, you gotta go down
Yeah.
and read 12. And what that states is, in the RA RB, and RC districts. Not less than 15,000 square feet of the required area of a lot shall consist of continuous building area, CBA,
Right.
as defined in section 165-7. Okay, now this is, if there was ever a conflict, this is it. And
Okay.
we did talk about it last year. The present definition for continuous building area, and this is the language that was adopted at the Springtown meeting last year. And I'll just read it quickly. That portion of a lot comprised exclusively of connected upland and consisting of such upland square footage / acreage equal to or greater than the minimum lot size requirement for the zoning district in which the lot is situated. Said upland shall exclude any freshwater wetland as delineated per chapter 161, wetlands protection in any pond or stream. Okay, so
That's the
that's the
definition.
present definition as adopted.
So we didn't, on that definition, we didn't include in that there's a minimum width to that land, so that's
That's another
another.
requirement that's
Okay.
already in there.
Got it, got it.
Lot depth and width, that's already in there. So what's happening is, basically, so you take that definition for continuous building area, and then you go to the minimum lot size within the intensity of use schedule, right? So the RA requires 15,000. It says 15, that means 15,000. RB 40,000, CA 15,000, CB 40, CC 80,000, IA 15,000, IB 80,000, and RC 80,000. All right, that's your minimum continuous building area requirement in accordance with the definition.
With the way the definition is now.
Right, all right? Now, but as note 12,
Right.
it's associated and very pertinent to that intensity of use schedule. In the RA, RB, and RC districts, it's 15,000.
No
No,
less than 15.
not less than 15.
No less than 15.
Not
John.
less than
Not
15.
less than 15.
But the others, for the other districts, is if you're going to do multifamily.
Well, that's note number 1, that's 10.
That's number
10,000
8.
square feet.
Number 8, I'm reading.
But
And
we're,
then number 9.
but we're not talking about those.
I know you aren't, but he's saying that there's a difference in the square footage requirement. But according to what you got here, the only districts that this 15,000 is pertinent to is if you're not going to do multifamily units. Because if you look at 8, you're going to need 20,000 square feet. And then, in the next one, you're going to need only for multifamily units. 9 is 40,000. So that's the other districts, the RB, which,
RB and the RC.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it, other than I want to bring this to the board's attention so that we are all on the same page.
Right.
And what I'm really asking in the staff report relative to this proposed amendment is that regardless of the definition, and regardless that these 3 zoning districts state in the intensity of use schedule, you need 40, 80, and 40,000 square feet, but you don't. You really don't. In those 3 districts, in accordance with note 12, you only need 15,000 of upland, continuous upland
building
for
area.
for each lot to be considered buildable.
well, the bigger requirement of the lot is the RC and the industrial C, okay? They're already 80,000 square feet. But the only difference for continuous building area is the 10,000 or the 20,000 for those districts if they're going to build a multifamily.
Yeah, but
That's
the only, yeah, but the only thing I'm concerned with is note 12. Because note 12 is a huge exception to the minimum lot size requirement that requires much larger lot sizes equal to the continuous building area equation.
For example,
Shall consist of,
according to note 12, the RB district, as long as it's not less than 15,000 square feet, it would be okay. And according to the table of use, the RB district, it's 40,000.
Yeah, but it's not continuous building area. See, if you could have a 40,000 square foot lot, and, you'd have, say, you had less than that, you had a big brook running through it, you would need at least 15,000 square feet to build on it.
right,
And that should not be changed, is my opinion. I can see the housekeeping and placing it where it belongs, but I don't think that should be changed. Because you know, you could have 80,000 square feet. And, if you're going to remove the, consistent building area, you're not paying any attention to, the wet areas. Continuous if you go back to read the continuous building definition. Where is it now?
well, we changed it.
Yeah, but you
That's
still,
right.
Yeah, but it does mention the minimum lot size requirement
Right.
within the definition, and the
Right.
minimum lot size requirement is specified for each district. And then you have
Right.
note 12 that allows for it. You know, it's really not in those districts, you don't have to come up with 40,000 square feet of.
Right, but when you think about it, if I had an
Yes, you
80,000
do.
square foot lot
Yeah.
yes, you
in
do,
the
because
RC,
I don't know where
I have a
we're,
lot. It's
we're not
80,000 square
seeing
feet,
eye to eye
yes.
here, John, something isn't.
No, you know, it's just, it's just that.
Could I do this? Let Harry just finish an example, because it might help. You were gonna paint an example, I think.
I have an 80,000 square foot lot in the RB. That's all. That's all I have is 80,000 square feet.
Yep.
Now, for my continuous building area, I have a stream running through it. And so,
And I want
according
to do a
to this-
multifamily home.
well, it's an RC, let's just,
All right.
single family, right? Just one single family home.
On this example.
Okay, in this example. And my continuous building area, it's, according to the definition we have now, it has to be exclusively connected upland, such that the square footage and the acreage is equal to or greater than the 80,000 feet.
That's right.
So in other words, if I have a drop of wetland on this, I can't build on this lot.
No, because that would be continuous. You'd go around the wetland, right? But if you had a stream running
Right, but it's not continuous.
east to west,
It's not continuous.
severing the continuous upland,
Right,
all right?
Yeah.
Then you'd have to have the minimum lot size on this side of the wetland.
well, wait a minute, I have,
Frontage side.
my lot's only 80,000 square feet, it's in the RC.
There's not enough room on either
And
side.
this part right here is wet. I can't build on it.
I wish we had a chalkboard, I really do.
You're talking a single family home.
1 square inch is
All right.
wet, I cannot build on it.
Yeah, but see,
According to-
you know,
Right.
that's right, that's right.
So that's where, I think that's where that,
You know, in a lot
what they're
of-
trying to get, that 15,000 square feet of continuous buildable area.
Yeah.
They're saying that, in other words, you don't need the entire thing to be high and dry to build on it. But they did wanna create some kind of a minimum area that is actually not swamp,
Yeah,
you know, that you have to build on.
yeah.
And I get what you're saying.
And as long as everybody here is on the same page and what note needs, then what we're dealing with, within this table, it allows for an exception in those 3 zones for anybody to create a new lot. And the minimum lot size criteria for building purposes is 15,000 square feet of continuous upland. It's not 80,000, it's not 40,000, it's 15,000.
Right.
That's what that says. So
But-
there's an exception
How are
for
you
those
getting
3
that?
zoning districts.
Read 6, 1657 again. And,
See, without note
it's
12
on
being
page,
stricken, in the RA, RB, and RC districts,
Three,
not
or
less
two.
than 15,000 square feet of the required area of a lot shall consist of continuous building area, as defined in 165-7.
One more time, say that one more time, I'm sorry.
They, read the note?
The note 12,
Yeah, it reads.
in the RBRC, RBA.
Not less than 15,000 square feet of the required
Of the required area.
area of a lot shall consist of continuous building area
In other words, I need to have at least 15,000 square feet
of upland.
of continuous upland,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term,
But if,
on the parcel.
right,
To
right.
Right.
But
And-
you're,
but to
you're
have a
striking
lot,
this.
to have a minimum lot,
Yeah.
according to my intensity of use table, if I'm in the RC, I need 80,000 square feet.
15,000 feet of which
15,000 feet of which are
And then
high,
you
are
build
high
high
and dry
and
upland.
buildable.
Yeah.
So the, and there, it was put in, as I can understand why, sometimes if you understand why, you can understand what
If you
that
look back on
means.
the history, absolutely, sure.
So the 15,000 is downtown, let's say that, in general. Those lots, that's the district for 15,000, there's a lot.
Okay.
Every piece of it has to be dry upland,
Right.
For it to
for a
work,
good reason,
for it to
Sure.
work,
okay?
because it's so
But
small.
if you have an RB, an RC, you have more land, so this shouldn't address you at all. It wouldn't hurt you at all, unless you're gonna put in a multifamily, then you're gonna need, per district, RB is 20,000
40?
square feet for a multifamily now.
Oh, 20,000 for the first unit, 10 for
And the RC is 40.
the 40,000.
Yeah, that's the reason for it, yeah. And so,
John, are you saying that 15,000 is not large enough? Is that what you're?
No, no, in matter of fact, RA shouldn't be included in note 12 anyway, because the minimum lot size
Is
15,000.
is 15,000 anyway,
Well,
so that
like
should be
Tilly just
strict.
said, you must be 100% high and dry.
Right.
and I
On
think
such
that's,
a
I
tiny
don't think that should be
15
removed, I'm sorry.
Now,
There's
15.
too much problems down there.
Yeah.
No, I know
No,
that, no.
no.
It
You're
has
not
not.
removing
No, we're not removing it, because the minimum lot size in the RA is 15,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Right.
But it also goes on that note, it goes on RB, right? The minimum lot size, continuous minimum lot size, continuous upland, minimum lot size is
Right.
40,000 square feet in the RB zone.
Right.
Except when you apply note 12,
Right,
then all of a sudden, the minimum lot size requirement for building purposes is 15,000 square feet
Lot size?
upland.
No,
Continu-
continuous buildable
Continuous
area.
upland. You still have to have 40,000 square feet,
right,
okay? But you only need 15,000 of continuous
that's right.
To build, yeah.
to build.
Yeah,
And that's how it's applied today.
yeah,
And then it's the same thing for the RC district, and the minimum lot size in the RC district is 80,000 square feet.
so there's really no change, it's just a little housekeeping that you've done. What is?
Right, but no, we really don't need to do anything.
Well,
RA shouldn't be listed. I'm saying we don't need to do anything if everybody here is comfortable
Yeah.
with keeping the minimum continuous building area upland 15,000 square feet.
Right,
Even though the minimum lot size is 80,000 for one lot.
Yeah, I am,
I think
I
so, too.
prefer
Yeah.
and more comfortable keeping it, getting rid of RA is fine.
yeah.
And just dropping the reference to RA, but keeping all the rest of the text.
No, I think you
Can I
need,
ask a
Wait,
question?
if you drop RA, then can't it be a 15,000 square foot lot that does have wetland on it?
well, I'm,
Well, it says not less than 15,000 square, right now it says, that note says not less than 15,000 square feet of the required area of a lot shall consist of
That's
continuous.
continuous.
So in downtown right now, if the RA stays in, for a new lot that would be created down there, you'd have to have 15,000 square feet minimum
High and dry.
continuous building area.
Right.
As opposed to right now,
So 15, so the RA should stay in.
yeah, it should
Yeah.
stay like it is,
if
yeah.
that's what you want.
because downtown's notoriously.
Just
wet.
at this time,
And
you know,
flooding,
there's just
flood
too many
prone.
problems there.
All right, I'm good.
Quick question
All
though,
right.
quick question.
So we leave it alone.
All right, let's leave that alone, but
All right.
So,
And you won't, and I
on the,
would,
the definition of continuous building area,
yeah,
you know, if you have a square and it's a 40,000 acre lot, and and using this stream covering it, using the stream as an issue, and it cuts the lot in half, and so you can't get access to all this upland in the back. And you have less than 15,000 square feet up front,
You need a variance.
Can't build.
you need a variance.
You need a variance.
yeah. And not only that, of course, then the Concom gets into their
Okay,
jurisdictions.
so what if it's not a stream, but it's a wetland that comes together on both ends? And there's a strip of upland that connects the two pieces, and that strip is 10 feet wide.
There's, are you gonna use the backland for your building purposes?
You're using it to make your calculation to meet the ordinance.
Yeah.
To find the 15,000.
This is why I keep going back to the question of what happened to that, and you won't know, but what happened to that 50-foot? There used to be in here somewhere a 50-foot dimension minimum requirement of connecting those kinds of pieces.
We just did that with an A and R plan, and they had to comply with that in Thurlow.
And 50-foot was,
Yeah.
they had to meet this
Yeah.
50-foot
Yeah,
connection. of
his
the two lots.
initial
Okay.
plan had to be revised.
So it is still in there.
And they were able to wiggle the lines around. Yeah, it's still in there.
Whereabouts is that?
Where is
'Cause
that?
I don't-
Where is
I don't
that?
remember
And
reading
that's in
that.
the zoning ordinance, and it also requires a that measurement to be, it's either
Okay.
30 or 50 feet back. And then at 150
Well,
feet
no,
back.
no, I'm
you-
not talking about going back. I'm
No, I
not
know,
talking
you're
about
width.
setbacks.
Yes, so that at 150 feet, you have to maintain a minimum of 50 feet of width of that lot.
And for thereafter
Yeah.
50-foot.
Yeah, now, when wetlands come
Okay.
into
right.
play, right?
That's the
Then
definition of lot width.
then you're impacting the buffer. So then you have to deal with
Yep,
Conservation
yep,
Commission.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah, that's a lot of that.
All right,
is
so-
Protected.
So one of those is legit. Do we have any, right, one of those is legit for?
Two, building height and building?
Yep,
Oh, yeah.
1 and 2.
1 and 2, yeah. So if this board wants to, I'll move forward with advertising those, so that we can.
Are we out of time for other ones?
1 and 2, we're
No,
changing
not-
2?
We're not out of time, but we're
Yeah, we're
really
not.
getting close.
Okay.
2 is
And
building height.
They have to be
Yeah.
figured out,
1.
actually, by the time we
That's
have
what
our
he's
next meeting,
describing.
it'll be too late to advertise for the annual town meeting.
That's what I mean, so we are too late. Tonight was our one shot for this?
Right. Now, there are some other ones being worked on.
You could-
No,
Can we-
I gotta
can't
bring
we
you up
get-
to
can't we
speed real
get-
quick.
Can't we get placeholders?
That's what I was gonna say, yes.
Can't-
Yeah,
I mean,
we can, but
can't
now
we
for
just go,
this-
can't we say we want 3,
Yeah.
just 3 ordinances that we'll go after?
Yeah, now the
Figure those
annual,
out.
I mean, the small cell, in all likelihood, anything we do is only going to need Board of Selectmen.
That's selectmen, that's not.
Approval as a
Correct, that's not-
regulation.
that's not
It's
this.
not an annual
Right.
town meeting thing.
So we, right now, we have this one here, which is building and building height, which is really one zoning ordinance.
Right, single.
So what I'm asking is, since next meeting is like the last meeting, can we just say we want this one as one single warrant article, and we want 2 placeholders for 2 more? And I mean, I've got a slew of zoning amendments, and I'm sure you guys have too, and we can come up with just 2 more, and 3 is plenty. It's the end of the night at a town meeting, no one wants to listen to this garbage. Everyone's just, like this, and they're talking stuff.
That's what I'm
3
doing
is-
right about
3
now.
is-
What
3 is
what
plenty.
else are we, what
Three is
else are we
plenty.
changing?
You have others. Yes, others.
There
Oh,
are
okay.
there are
The
others
third
that I'll bring in. If you don't wanna do them,
Oh, no, I'm
next,
just saying.
next meeting, we can.
Yeah, the third
about it.
one we thought we would have to do was the erosion and stormwater.
Road stormwater control, but we
Then
don't need
found
to.
out, so that was gonna be the third one, you and I talked about having
Yeah.
3.
Yep.
Um,
But can we
Again,
come to the next meeting? and-
You can't, because, Mike is telling me, the deadline
Okay,
for
so we
submission.
can't come to the next meeting.
Yeah.
So can
It-
can we do this? Can we, then tonight, can we say we've got 1 and we want 2 placeholders for a total of 3? Can we do that?
You have one.
Well,
But there's no time for 2 and 3.
We'll run out of time. How about if, for this for a suggestion, I can work with Les tomorrow and come up with a zoning ordinance he really wants to prioritize to get forward.
What's
and
it
put the
for?
language together and advertise it.
Well, I guess.
Not following. Isn't it right here? Don't you have it right here? Isn't this the language?
So we're
Well,
not,
no, these are the two we're willing to
Just
go
getting
with
another one.
tonight.
but this is one, this is one,
Two,
this is,
it's actually two.
What?
It's two definitions, building and.
but it's one warrant article, right? This is not two warrant articles we're changing one zoning amendment, two
Yeah,
pieces.
Change the
we-
definitions
Yeah,
of.
if we
Yeah,
can get
they're all
away with that
definitions.
being one,
It is
Yeah.
to amend chapter 165-7, definition.
One doesn't work without the other.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, because they're both,
So that's-
they're both definitions
So that's,
in chapter 165-7.
right.
Right, and as far as amending the intensity of use, we're not doing that, right?
right, we're not.
Third
gonna
one.
do
We
we're not
scrubbed
doing,
that.
yeah.
The second one.
Right.
Well, yeah, second,
The
yeah.
other way we could
The
do
number
it,
3 there, but yeah, it's the second one.
the other way we could do it is, if,
That's
Rob,
what
if you wanna come up with language for 1, 2, 3, whatever.
But the
right?
board won't have an opportunity to respond.
Yeah, but we'll have a public hearing on it and they can respond at that point.
How does this sound,
Yes,
Mr.
yeah,
Chairman?
yeah,
I make
nay.
a motion to authorize John, the town planner, to notice in a public paper, in a newspaper, general circulation, three public hearings. Three public hearings. The first of which is for amendment for the building and building height. I'm trying not to go too fast, John, I'm sorry.
No, I get it, I get it.
Okay? Okay, that's the first public hearing. The second would be for a regulatory change for adoption of regulations under chapter 57.
Yeah, but we don't need to do that.
We need to have a hearing.
Yeah, okay.
So you
Just
know,
as
this is
public
a
hearing.
notice, this is
Yeah,
about
yeah.
notices in the paper.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
jumping a step here.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
go, roll with it.
No annual town
Roll
meeting.
with it, roll with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
could include that
Yeah.
into the advertising.
And number 3, the third public notice for a public meeting, which would be for, fill in the blanks there.
Well, I want to go back and,
Is this the
I-
resolution?
huh?
Is this the resolution, the resolution?
No, it's, well, this isn't the way to do it.
Well, you're on a tight timeline.
This
Too
isn't the
rushed.
way to
If
do
you,
it.
if you're gonna get it to town meeting.
No,
you have to get
I
it to-
know,
you have to notice your hearings now.
I know, I wish I
I
knew tonight
appreciate
was
it.
the
Now,
only
the
night.
third one might be, might end up being the Green Communities one, stretch.
No.
That would be
Stretch
good to
code.
get that initial,
Yeah, you
because
know,
of what's down the
I'm there,
the
I'm with you
pike
there.
coming.
That would be the
Okay,
most
yeah.
important one if we're going to try to apply for
Good catch.
the October,
Good catch, good catch.
once in a
Yeah.
while.
For the, to adopt
First
stretch
step out of the
code,
way.
to adopt stretch code in the town of Georgetown.
I-
And maybe the 4th, is there a 4th? What would you
I,
say?
Assuming
I
everybody's gonna be
can't,
so
I cannot,
asleep
I
that-
cannot respond tonight and just come up with the wording to get this right tonight. I needed to plan for this tonight, and I'm a little miffed. So I pass on any ones I have.
Can you paraphrase it?
No, I'm
And John
not
can
gonna-
lock
I'm
it
not-
down?
No, I'm not gonna do
I've
it that
never
way, Harry.
heard
It's-
of the
it's a little
building
more
inspector being
complicated
part
than
of the
that. I just
zoning
can't do it that
amendment
way.
process.
Zoning
He
amendments are
can
not
make
something-
suggestions to us,
Right, that's what he's doing.
yeah, but he can't,
Right, he can't author them, or he
he
can't.
can't compose it. I mean, he can
can't
give
sponsor
us
them.
some ideas, but I don't think that's part of the state requirement.
No, but I mean, he's the one that has to deal with the zoning ordinances every
Right.
day. and
True.
He knows the weaknesses and the strengths,
Yeah.
so he would, he's a party to recommending to the planning board,
Talk about
less.
less, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, just to reiterate my motion, because it got lengthy there, 3 notices in the paper. First, for the public hearing for the zoning amendment, to change the definitions, under 165-7. The second for, public hearing to, hold the, adopt regulations under chapter 57. And the third to hold a public hearing to adopt the stretch code.
How about the OSRD? You had mentioned that. You wanna remove that section where they are exempt from the affordable housing?
We already did that. We did that. We did.
When?
We did,
Yep, we did.
we did last year.
Yeah, just last year.
They let us do it, and it was passed.
All right. All right.
It was a
So,
squeaker, but we did.
Those are three. That's my motion, Mr.
I
Chairman.
forgot all about it.
If
It
you'll
really
hear it.
squeaked by.
That's my motion if you'll hear it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Second?
Good.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. I can't repeat it. Someone else is gonna,
Is
as
everybody-
noted.
Everybody's clear on it, though.
Yeah, we got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who was the second?
Unanimous.
Joanne's falling asleep,
Oh,
but she
yeah,
wasn't quick
yeah.
enough. She usually has the quick trigger, but
All right.
I've been jumping. Sorry, I
Oh,
apologize.
I was up much too late last night.
John, to your knowledge, when does the warrant actually close?
I've been talking a lot with Mike and Janet about that. They want everything done, planning board wise, April first. Because the annual town
Yeah,
meeting
but they're not
is,
gonna close the warrant April 1st.
I think they're closing it at the end of
Yeah.
March.
Oh, really?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
We,
That's awful quick.
Yeah.
Actually,
I don't-
I thought it would've been closed. I would've thought you'd close it in the second week of March.
so,
That's like in these streets, you know, realistically, formal requests for acceptance of streets should be done, you know, September, October.
Nobody thinks about these things
Yeah.
until right before town meeting. People don't realize
So,
the enormity of the amount
wait,
of
wait,
state aid you need.
look for a motion to adjourn.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to adjourn the public meeting.
I second.
Motion's been made, seconded, all in favor? Aye.
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 We are done.